now.
Hello, everybody.
Like I have to
Hello,
do-
welcome.
Put a dress on or something.
Hello.
No, we're just getting really fancy dancy. Oh, now you screened him out. There you go. All right. All right, 4 minutes. But we're streaming already live on YouTube, it says so.
I'd start that.
Thank you. And Michael, are you still going to be able to help bring people in from the public to speak?
Well, yeah, I mean, Amy will do the actual bringing, but I'll keep track of everybody, yes. Although Amy did not get a list from Amy of who's actually signed up, if anybody.
Where is Michael?
He's at town hall because the storm knocked out internet at their building.
He sounds like he's in a cavern.
First floor conference room. We've been
Amy.
there.
Hey, hi.
Harvey, was there a person named Lamar signed up to speak?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I don't see which item.
I think it would be the UNC presentation. It was just a UNC student that reached out, and I don't know if they ran into some difficulty with that.
Yes.
But I will text them and see.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, how are you?
Doing all right. How about y'all?
We're good.
Good.
We're waiting for you to comment on Ty, and we all have.
Ty is looking to fly.
Ooh, what was the word?
Well, Ty is looking to fly.
Ooh, there we go.
Nice ring to it.
You from the 1970s or something?
Thanks, Michael.
And Diane, we do have you signed up to speak a little bit later in the meeting, and so we'll call on you at that time. I'm gonna lower your hand at the moment.
All right, 1 minute and counting, folks. Do we have everybody? Just a friendly reminder that we'll have to do the roll call at the beginning, and we do have a proclamation and a couple of announcements.
We're
And
going to be quick, though. All of it is going to be really quick.
welcome, Miss Anderson. How are you?
I've been here. I'm just
Wrong Anderson. Sorry, we're
and
gonna have.
really, really quick.
Yeah, I said wrong Anderson. Welcome a new. Miss
Oh,
Anderson.
Oh,
All right.
man. Now I'm going to be confused all the time. I'm so excited.
All right, everyone, please mute themselves. Appreciate it. All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 29th, 2020 special meeting of the Chapel Hill Town Council. Before we get started, I want to make sure that we have a couple of changes to this evening's agenda. As in the case in our other special meetings, we'll be receiving an update from the managers and staff on our town's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll have that right before UNC presents their information. And tonight we have some exciting things. We have an announcement of our new town attorney, but we'll get to that. An update from UNC about the fall roadmap and a vote on funding for the Elliott Road Extension Project. And we always value public input. We know that these times of doing it virtually make it a little more difficult. We normally don't meet during the summer months, but we had a few items that we wanted to make sure that we attended to, especially appointing our new attorney, as our wonderful attorney Ralph Carpanos is leaving us. So anyway, we also have a proclamation, but a friendly reminder that we will ask people when there's time at the different items for public input. We'll bring 2 of you in at a time. Mr. Parker will call out both names in order to help with transitions to bring in 2 that we ask the second person to be ready. We have a lot of special guests with us this evening from UNC, and we'll get to that in just a minute too. But first, We have to do, in keeping with the state law, we have to do a roll call. It has to be verbal from our council. So as I call your name, if you'll unmute yourself and say present, I would appreciate that. Mayor Pro Tem Michael Parker,
Present.
Councilmember Jess Anderson,
Present.
Councilmember Alan Boyncy,
Present.
Councilmember Hong Ben Gu,
Present.
Councilmember Tai Nguyen,
Present.
Councilmember Amy Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Karen Stegman,
Here.
and the mayor is also present here too. Okay, so we're going to move into our proclamation, which we're handling them a little differently now, so bear with me here. But this August marks the 55th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act and the 150th anniversary of the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution. In recognition of these important events, the Town Council and I are going to be issuing a proclamation that will be shared through our communications and social media channels. And I want to thank Councilmember Alan Boyncy for bringing this forward. And I've asked him to share a few remarks, not to read the whole proclamation, but to share some remarks. And if we can hear from him, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So on August 6, 1965, 55 years will be next week, Thursday, I believe, but President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law. And this year marks the 150th anniversary of the 15th Amendment ratification to the Constitution. The Reconstruction period following the end of the American Civil War fought over slavery saw one of the boldest eras in American history. Through the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, Black men were freed, given citizenship, and the Constitution declared their right to vote guaranteed without infringement. And yet, over the subsequent nearly 100 years, Black men and women and other minorities saw their voting rights curtailed and stripped, in effect, by Jim Crow laws, which imposed poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, not to mention the intimidation, beatings, and killings of any Black person trying to exercise their due rights. We must remember that while our own state of North Carolina ratified the 15th Amendment to the Constitution and subsequently saw a number of Black people exercise their right to vote and also saw folks get elected to the General Assembly and to Congress, by 1900, their political voices were all but eliminated from elections, thanks to those Jim Crow laws I mentioned. Ultimately, it took the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to correct these wrongs and to compel states and regions of our country, which had suppressed minority votes, to run any voting law changes by the US Department of Justice before those states and those regions could pass those changes. But with Shelby County versus Holder in 2013, the United States Supreme Court undercut that pre-clearance requirement. And so we have had the proliferation of measures to suppress the vote over the past decade, including the voter photo ID laws, which I should say will not be in effect for this election this fall. And as the town recognizes the anniversaries of these two monumental measures, the 15th Amendment and the Voting Rights Act, we also urge all citizens to exercise their right to vote this fall, whether you submit a mail-in ballot or in person. Have your say in the fate of our state and of our country through your voice and through your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyncy. And we're grateful for all those organizations that help work to make sure that people are able to vote and to educate people about where they can vote and what elections are up. But we also want to make sure that people are getting information about how to safely vote. So you'll look for more information through the town channels. And we always encourage people to sign up for the town e-newsletter. There's lots of great information coming out, especially in today's time. It's easy to sign up. You go to the front of our website and just sign up to get the town e-news, and we will make sure that that is posted out there. So thank you. And that proclamation will go out through our social media channels. Thank you very much. All right, a couple of other announcements. In June, our council proclaimed June 19th, 2020 as Juneteenth in celebration of the day in 1865 when slaves in Galveston, Texas learned they were free. We've had many requests to adopt Juneteenth as a town-wide holiday. Our manager and staff will be bringing information to us in September, at which time we can have a community conversation about how we'd like to move forward with that idea. So look for that information to be coming in September, early September, as we come back into full session. So just putting that out there. The census, we're still only tracking at about 68.2% in Orange County. So if you have not filled out your census information, we need you to do that. This helps our community. it appropriates dollars and representation, but that's not a passing grade, guys. Let's get up there. Let's get in there and get everyone to fill out. It takes about 5 minutes to fill out the census form. They don't track, they're not looking for you individually. They're just trying to count information. They're not storing your information, all that kind of thing. So please fill out your census form. And a reminder to council, we have a closed session after this meeting tonight. Immediately following, it's a different webinar, so you'll have to log out and log back in. So there we go. All right. Next up, does anyone else have any announcements before we move to consent agenda? We have a lot of information to share tonight, so I'm sure there'll be other opportunities. Okay, we have a consent agenda before us.
I move the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Anderson. Any comments or concerns? We have some good information in here, especially purchase of new video equipment to help us broadcast better on our cable channel and other things. I will need to take a roll call vote again, please. So bear with me. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boyncey.
Aye.
Councilmember Hong Bin Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor, and did I get you? Yeah, I got you. And the mayor votes yes as well. Did I get you, Alan? Yes. Sorry, I was trying to do it off page. Sorry. All right, the motion is unanimous. Thank you for the consent agenda, and I look forward to hearing when we get the new equipment and all those updates. All right. So this evening, we're delighted to welcome, where she is, there she is, Ms. Anderson. We're delighted to welcome Ann Anderson to the Chapel Hill leadership team as our new town attorney. In making our decision, we had a strong pool of candidates. We did a national search. We used a Development Associates consulting firm, and Ms. Anderson really stood out to us with her depth and breadth of knowledge and her familiarity with local government, as she has been teaching in the School of Government, and her understanding of the community values that Chapel Hill holds dear. We knew it would be difficult to replace our wonderful Ralph Carpanos, who's been 32 years with the town. He's built an amazing body of legal knowledge and institutional memory, and I know that he will be working with Ann as transition over, and that Ralph has promised to stay local and available so we can have some help. But Ann, we're delighted to welcome you in. And if you wanted to say a few words, we're happy. You will be joining officially September 1st, but we wanted to go ahead and make this appointment so that we could get you started.
I just want to thank you very much for this opportunity. I so look forward to it. I've had an amazing career so far, and this is a new highlight for me. And I look forward to working with all of you on your priorities, the ones you have now and the ones you'll have in the future. And I just thank you for the chance to do this for the town that I love. And I'll see you in September.
That's great. Council members, anyone else have any additional comments, or we need to make a motion?
I move we appoint Ann Anderson as town attorney and approve the contract that has been agreed to.
Second.
It's been motioned by Mr. Parker, and I'll say second by Mr. Boyncey, but I see that our attorney has his hand up, so we will call Mr. Carpanos before we take the official vote. Mr. Carpanos.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I understand my children and grandchildren are watching
I saw that.
in New York and Nashville, and I wanted to say hi to them and just congratulate Ann and the Mayor and Council for their outstanding choice. I do look forward to working with Ann in the coming weeks during this transition period. Chapel Hill has been our home since 1985, and whatever else happens, we will always consider it to be our home. Please let me know if I can be of help in the future as we face the many challenges ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. And we look forward to celebrating you. Tonight was about appointing him, but we look forward to celebrating you. And we're going to figure out how to do that, either virtually and or in person at some point, but we will work with you to find what works best so that your family can also be present for that. It's just been an unusual time, and we appreciate your patience in working with us too. You announced that you were going to retire, but you were willing to work with us so that we could have a smooth transition. And that's the nature of how you've always been. You've been willing to help wherever needed. So thank you so much for that. All right.
Ralph, who's in Nashville?
One of my sons, his wife, and their two children. And my other son, Jonathan, Justin's in Nashville. Jonathan is in Brooklyn with his wife and their 3 children.
Oh, yay.
Hey, Ralph's family.
Yeah. I'm sure Ralph will enjoy having his, and Carol will enjoy having their Wednesday evenings back free. But all right, it's been moved and seconded. Again, I need a roll call vote again, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Voinsey.
Aye.
Councilmember Hong Bin Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen. Sorry, I'm bouncing around on here. Sorry. Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And the mayor votes emphatically aye. So motion is unanimous and welcome aboard. We're very excited.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you all.
And we'll send the press release out, and you're welcome to stay with us this evening, or you're welcome to just follow along or whatever. And if you need anything from us, we're ready to answer.
On this particular evening, my children might dictate how well I can stay on. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Just to remind you, our meetings are recorded, so you can always go back and watch it later.
That's right. That is right.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, next up, we are going to have a presentation from our staff about the COVID-19 response, and then we'll launch in. It's a short presentation, but then we're going to launch into our guests here from UNC to do their presentation. And council has sent in many questions, so we will listen to see what answers we've gotten from those questions, and then we will have a bit of a dialogue. So, Ms. Drayton.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Kelly Drayton. I'm the Emergency Management Coordinator for the Town of Chapel Hill. This brief presentation will provide just a few key updates from the town's COVID-19 response over the past few weeks. So over the past few weeks, staff has continued to work with local and regional partners to provide services and programs to those most vulnerable within our community. The Orange County Department of Housing and Community Development is doing a fantastic job administering the Emergency Housing Assistance Program on behalf of the towns, as well as managing the Housing Helpline. County staff estimates that 400 households have applied for assistance, and since January, 369 households have received assistance, roughly half of which, 49% of that assistance was provided to Chapel Hill residents. While IFC residents have been staying in a local hotel in order to practice safe physical distancing, the IFC staff has continued to make improvements to the community house so that when residents can return, it's to a safer environment. These improvements include safety shields in high traffic areas and partitions in communal spaces. We continue to partner with numerous organizations to provide critical resources to our community. To date, we've distributed over 18,000 masks through a variety of community partners. Our weekly food bank has seen a slight decrease in numbers over the past few weeks, but we're still serving between 250 and 300 households per week. Approximately 700 masks, including children's masks, were provided at last week's food distribution. And during today's distribution, we provided information about participating in the 2020 census. Staff also continues to participate in bi-weekly coordination calls with our local providers to address long-term food distribution needs and coordination. Currently, our food access providers are reporting that their food supplies are adequate and numbers of households assisted are remaining stable. Amid the pandemic, childcare has emerged as one of the major challenges facing families with children in our community and really across the country. Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools has announced that instruction will be conducted virtually for at least the first semester of the 2021 school year, which impacts over 12,000 students and families in our community. Town staff is coordinating with Orange County Department of Social Services staff to explore options for providing childcare. We're also exploring opportunities for partnerships with the school system, the YMCA, and other community organizations that have experience with dependent care. I'm excited to announce that just earlier today, the very first section of our Franklin Street closure was put into place. That's on East Franklin Street between Robertson Lane and the mid-block crosswalk near Carolina Coffee. This closure provides downtown businesses with additional capacity for sidewalk dining and sales, as well as a protected pedestrian lane to create more space for people to bike, walk, and run, all while maintaining proper physical distancing. And finally, the town continues to work with our local partners and our recovery consultant to engage in long-term recovery planning. Our project management team has briefed each of the recovery support groups and has worked with the economic recovery group on an impact assessment, which should be disseminated next week. A formal kickoff for all stakeholders is planned for August 6th. And next week, we expect to receive a schedule from our consultant outlining strategies for stakeholder engagement, consensus building, and project evaluation. And finally, we'll be working across stakeholders to launch a project website that will serve as a central portal for recovery resources and information. And with that, we'd be happy to take any questions that the council may have.
Council questions, Ms. Stegman?
First, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of the staff. And I know it was a huge collaboration across a lot of departments to make the lane closing on Franklin Street happen. So thank you for seeing it through. I know it was delayed for several reasons, but we thought it had started earlier and talked about a sort of initial pilot phase that would end in September. I forget the date, but are we talking about extending it since we're only just starting now in August?
Councilmember Stegman, we had looked at extending it well into the fall. So probably either late September, early October, early to mid-October we were looking at. But I think we're going to evaluate that as we go through, see how things are going. And if things are going well, we easily could extend that.
Great. Thank you. Just one clarification. I think, Kelly, that you said that the schools are going to be online for the first semester. I think it's just the first 9 weeks unless something changed and I missed that. So I wanted to check, see if which one is accurate.
What we've heard is the first 9 weeks at this point. And they're going to evaluate that. I think they're taking input right now from parents, and then they'll make they may make some adjustments later on, but right now it's 9 weeks.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Anderson?
I really want to also thank the staff for tackling all the things, but the thing that I think is really on parents' minds right now is this childcare issue. So I really am so thankful that you all are trying to figure that out and coordinate. I am wondering, are there ways that we can do some targeted communications? How are we making sure that our families who really need it the most kind of get first in line? And really on it, just thank you so much for thinking about that. Because I think, not only is it scary for people to just not know how to teach their kids, but I think we just have a lot of community members who have to work. And so all the things that we're trying to do to buoy people, we would just see such an influx of people needing services if they couldn't get to work, if they had to be home. So I think it's really such an important thing. But yeah, I'm wondering how we're getting kind of prioritization on our lists and how we're signing people up or as we go.
Well, at this point, we're not signing folks up for childcare.
Yes, understood.
We're working with our partners to try to find some opportunities there. And we are we're having a discussion with one provider to possibly utilize some of our space in our community center and some of our other centers here in the town. So, and I think that there is a priority absolutely for folks who are in our most vulnerable populations. So we've had a lot of discussions about how we can accommodate them and find out what their needs are. And I know that's been part of what the school system has been trying to do as well, is to find out how best to meet the needs of all of their students, of course, but then also very specifically how to meet the needs of the folks in our vulnerable population. So we are having those conversations both with our nonprofit partners out in the community, but then also with Orange County as well.
That's great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I wanted to share with council a couple of things. This Friday, the moratorium on evictions is set to be lifted in North Carolina. We were hoping they would extend it. We know the utility one has also been told that it would be lifted. We expect to see an increase in requests. The staff has worked very hard to help coordinate. They've been working all along. They will continue. We've got community partners helping us as well in this endeavor. So it'll take a lot of resources to help folks out. But if individuals who would like to be helpful, we do have a mechanism to accept donations. If you're willing to make a donation to the rental assistance fund or any of those funds, you can go to our town website and you can make a donation. We had some ones early on. We have actually used all those up. So if there are people out there wishing to make a donation to help with people so that we don't have evictions, I will tell you the coordinated efforts done a really good job too of getting some attorneys to help out and when the eviction process starts so they can work with families in the court system and so that we can redirect to people who might not have known about the rental assistance funding. So there's a lot of coordinated effort that's been going on in our county. And that's how we like to do it. We want to coordinate together and make sure all folks are covered and we're doing the best. The other thing I wanted to tell you is we sent emails last week to our federal representatives and now our state representatives as well. The USDA extension for food waivers is set to expire also at the end of August, and with schools staying virtual for at least the first 9 weeks, that would mean that we can't serve children who aren't enrolled in free and reduced lunch. And right now we're serving children 0 to 18 at all of the feeding sites for food for students this time frame. We'd like to continue. We'd like to have those waivers continue. Liz Cartano, who works with Child Nutrition Services, who is the hometown hero for the 36 feeding sites and all the wonderful things she's helping in partnership. There's a lot of partners. It's updating the school board this time too. But we sent letters out and we're working through Metro mayors to help get support from other mayors across the state to get our federal representatives. David Price has been always very gracious to advocate for this. So we'll keep you updated on that. But we want to continue to make sure that children get healthy food, especially when they're not going to have access to being physically in the school sites. So I share that with you. And just on a sidebar, if you haven't been by Chapel Hill High School that's being renovated, I encourage you to take a drive by. It's fascinating, and they're in the demolish mode of the old building and the new building. So there's a lot of good work still happening during the summer with the school site. So got that. All right. I don't know if we had people actually sign up to speak for this item. I was hoping we could roll them together for the two since we're talking COVID all together. So I'm going to ask that if you are wanting to send a question in, you're welcome to send your question into the question and answer, and we'll try to make sure if it's not covered, we'll try to make sure we get it registered. But we are pleased to have our partners of UNC here, and I'm going to introduce Provost Bob Lewin to lead this effort on updating us on things going on with our UNC system here in Chapel Hill and Orange County. And then we will open it up for clarifying questions from the council and then opportunity for the public to ask some questions. We may not be able to answer all the questions this evening, so I will tell you that we will record your questions and try to get answers back to you, but it may not be possible. As I'm sure the UNC reps will share with you, things are changing on a daily basis and new information becomes available. Things actually tend to move and change a little bit. So thank you for joining us this evening, Provost, and all of your team. We look forward to having you share with us, and welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Heminger, and I just want to thank the Town Council for giving us the opportunity to present to you tonight and to answer any questions that might be on your mind. As I understand, I'm going to make about 15 minutes of opening remarks, and then we'll introduce my two colleagues, Dr. Kurt Ribisol, who is the Joanne Earp Distinguished Professor and Department Chair in the Department of Health Behavior at the Gilling School of Global Public Health, and Dr. Allison Lazard, who is Associate Professor at the Hussman School of Journalism and Media. And they're going to make brief presentations. Their expertise is in the area of communication, particularly reaching out to younger people with regards to behavior modification. I know a number of the questions that have been directed toward me has been actually in relationship to our students and trying to make sure that our students are cooperative in adhering to our community standards. And so they will speak to some of those questions. First of all, I guess I just wanted to start off by saying that we have really enjoyed our partnership with the town. It has been truly a pleasure to work with you on many areas, and certainly during this rather challenging time. We have tried very hard to continue to be good partners with the town, actually with the town of Chapel Hill, as well as the town of Carrboro, as well as working in concert with the Orange County people. So we have been trying very hard to keep in touch with all of those constituents and seeking regular input, in fact, weekly input from each of you in this regard. We've been working on the Carolina Together roadmap, which is our plan to try to bring our campus back together to pursue its mission of education, research, and service. We believe strongly that this university is doing its job best when we're doing it together. We do understand that we're in a very different place in our world right now with COVID-19. We are monitoring and tracking data nationally, globally, as well as within the county and on our campus. Our school, our university has been very fortunate to have the opportunity to have world-class faculty who are actually experts in COVID-19, both in terms of patient care as well as in the research space. UNC has been designated as the leading nation's research center for COVID-19 basic and clinical research. So we're very proud of that, and it's one reason why it's very important that we try our very best to maintain that aspect of our mission. One thing that we embarked on 3.5 months ago to begin to address our strategy was how can we continue to pursue our mission during the COVID-19 pandemic. And so that has been our goal from the very beginning, to try to do our very best, to put our best effort forward in order to fulfill that particular mission. And so we have worked very closely, not only with the Orange County Department of Public Health, but also with our system office and others within our university community. And as I mentioned, we have had a really strong working relationship with the Orange County Department of Public Health, and Quintana and Erica have been very much involved in the helping us put together the roadmap, and we consult with them on a weekly basis. The hallmarks of the roadmap really lie in our community standards, and our community standards are really predicated on a commitment on the part of our community to wear masks, to physical distance, and to hand wash and to sanitize their hands on a regular basis. We do feel that consistent with CDC recommendations, with the guidance that we have received from our experts here on campus, particularly our infectious disease experts, our virologists, and our world-class public health experts, that we feel that we're getting real-time information and data, not only with respects to what is best practices, but also with respects to cutting edge research that is on the horizon. And so we've been monitoring all aspects of that within our roadmap. We've been also putting together metrics to watch on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, and putting that into context with regards to the rapid changes that are taking place all around us at the state level, at the county level, as well as at the national level. And so we have really 5 general buckets, that we are looking at and monitoring. First, our campus adherence to community standards and guidelines. Second, our public health and hospital capacity. Third, our availability of rapid and accurate testing and contact tracing. On that regard, as you may know, our campus health and our occupational health has in the past used LabCorp as its major testing site. We know, however, that delays in response time from LabCorp is evident with anywhere from 5 to 7 day returns on tests, on COVID-19 tests. We have been embarking on a more intimate collaborative relationship with UNC Healthcare. And we have been partnering with them in trying to establish and ensure that our campus, as it relates to campus health, and in particular student health, as well as occupational health, that of our faculty and our staff, is consistent with best practices within the health professions. And so they have been very instrumental in helping us to ramp up our testing capacity, and also systems that will enable us to process students, faculty, and staff through that system. And so we will be, in the very near future, not only using LabCorp, but we will add a second test site, a test lab in the form of UNC Healthcare. And we have an agreement, of course, depending upon available resources, for them to do a certain number of tests per day on our behalf. We will continue to use LabCorp as a additional testing site, but mainly for those tests in which a rapid turnaround is not as critical. We will continuing our examination of critical functions as our 4th criteria. And then finally, consideration of external factors that may influence campus operations as our 5th criteria or bucket, by which we will be monitoring our readiness to continue to battle the COVID-19 on our campus. There are many other aspects of our plan that I'd just like to briefly touch base with you on, because there have been several questions about what our expectations are of our students returning to campus. We sent out last week a document. It in essence is a document that summarizes 2 things. It provides a summary of our community standards. And secondly, it provides a summary of the relative risks of returning to campus if they choose to come. Most importantly is that we're asking our students to read our community standards and to attest not only that they have read those standards, but that they pledge to adhere to those standards, and that they sign off as a condition of their enrollment at UNC to adhere and support those standards. And so we can talk maybe a little bit more, and you may have questions with regards to accountability, but we are insisting as a condition of students coming back to Chapel Hill that they would attest to complying with these standards. And embedded in that attestation is certainly their support for adhering not only to the standards that we have expressed here on the Chapel Hill campus, but also those that have been expressed and articulated through the Orange County government and other state government authorities who expect our students and expect every citizen to comply with physical distancing, mask wearing, and hand sanitizing. We know that Greek life has been an issue for many of you, and it is an issue for us as well. And certainly we have been working very closely with the Orange County Public Health Department. We have met with the various organizations representing the fraternities and the sororities in collaboration with the Orange County Health Department. We have asked and will demand from our fraternities and sororities a plan that will be submitted to the Orange County Health Department for review and subsequent approval if appropriate. And so we do have, I just want you to know that we are working very closely and in concert with the health department to make sure that our students in Greek life are aware of and complying with those standards. I know that our two police chiefs have been working very closely together, seamlessly, I think, as it relates to those areas of the community that might be affected by our student residents, but who may be living off campus or in fraternities and sororities, as I think you know, are not on university property. So our ability to control some aspects of that life is somewhat limited and does fall under the purview of the town. So I just wanted to let you know that these are things that are on our mind. We know that they are on your mind. We are working very diligently in partnership with the town of Chapel Hill and with the county, Orange County, in order to maximize our effectiveness. We also are very pleased, that Orange County has established its own ordinance with regards to mask wearing, social distancing, and particularly those two elements of our own standards, and in doing so, create an expectation for our students as they navigate in and out of the campus environment into the town, that they do it with a common umbrella of a common community standard. I know that many of you have been concerned about faculty and staff and our accommodations for them. We have given maximum flexibility for faculty and staff to return to campus, very similar to what we did in the spring semester, when we had to make a very quick pivot and go totally remote. So faculty and staff who have a condition, clinical condition that might predispose them to undue risk, or a family member who may have a similar risk, we are giving them full accommodations and with the ability to continue to work from home. We are extending a similar courtesy to our staff and will continue to support our staff as they also wrestle with practical issues, not only in the area of health, but also in family circumstance where they might be caring for a family member or have a circumstance that will make it very difficult for them to return to campus. And so we do expect a significant decrease in the density of our campus from faculty and staff. We also have extended an offer to our students to de-densify the dorms within our university. And that communication went out to our students last week or a week and a half ago. And it allows our students to get out of their lease to enable them to return home at no financial penalty to them. We expect that the melt from that will be about 30%. And so that will represent a further de-densifying of the university campus. So I know I'm approaching the end of my 15 minutes. And so with that, I will ask Dr. Kurt Rivasol to power up his presentation. And then he will be followed by Allison Lazard, and then we'll open it up for questions. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I look forward to talking with you about some of the strategies that we're undertaking to address the challenges presented by the pandemic. There's a number of public health communication strategies, behavioral science techniques that we're using as part of the UNC response. Next. Maybe we go full screen on that if we could. So we've assembled multiple teams working together. This is our public health. This is just a subset of our public health education working group. We have a large number of members with expertise from across campus. from School of Public Health, School of Medicine, School of Media and Journalism, and so forth. Go next. And again, is it possible to go to the full screen so we could see the entire presentation rather than the, but here's a list of the teams. You can see people also from Campus Health, the whole communications team, epidemiology. UNC is an excellent infectious disease group, health behavior, behavioral science group, student affairs. We also have students participating on the committee. So when we're proposing some of the things that we're talking about, we've done this with student input, as well as other campus partners. Some of the key things, we've taking sort of an evidence-based approach to applying behavioral science to the public health challenges that we're facing here. We've really focused on what are the behaviors. There's a lot that you could focus on, but we've really winnowed it to 3, focusing on wearing some type of facial covering, physical distancing, and hand washing. So these are the key priority behaviors that we're working on. We've been studying the different types of messages that will resonate with students, as well as the optimal channels to reach students. Key is providing readily accessible information, but also changing the campus environment so that it's going to support behavior change. So it's not just purely a persuasion type approach, but we're also doing things like providing masks. We're also changing the way the campus is laid out to promote physical distancing and so forth. Next. So there's also been a survey of 7,000 students where we asked them, this is led by Dr. Audrey Pettifor, who's in epidemiology, and we're pretty pleased to find out that people are pretty inclined to wear masks. So we find that 84% of undergraduates and 92% of graduate students said that they're extremely or somewhat likely to wear a mask to class. This is going to be a policy, so I'm pretty confident we're going to see extremely high rates of this, but this is just assessing at baseline where people are at. And currently, we ask students, are you currently wearing a mask? This is, again, they did this during the summer at home when you go out in public, and 92% of people are already wearing masks. So the fact that we have 9 out of 10 students already wearing masks, we think this is going to be a hopeful signal for the rest of the semester. As you heard, Carolina Together is the theme program for the roadmap of the campus, and this is really the hub of getting information. Next. We focus on, as part of the campaign, as you see, the 3 W's are a way to just really remember the 3 key behaviors that we talked about: wearing a face covering, waiting 6 feet apart, and washing hands. Next. There's been a whole series of iconography and imagery created just for the particular Carolina Together campaign. Next. And here's some of the tactics. One of the key things you heard about that Provost Bloom mentioned is that there's an acknowledgement of community standards. And with the acknowledgement of the community standards, people are making their pledge that they are going to be practicing the types of behaviors that we've talked about. Over 25,000 UNC students have already signed the attestation on the community standards, which is the majority of students. People are still following up with the rest. There's a video we'll show in just a moment that's being released about why I wear a mask. And this is based on a number of behavioral science principles in social cognitive theory and social influence theory to really get people to adopt a new behavior by promoting role modeling, also asking the students what is the reason behind why they want to wear a mask or they have been wearing a mask, and also acknowledging it's not always fun. And so saying, but there is a bigger purpose and a reason, and it's worth it for why we should do it. We also have a wide broad representation of students featured in that video. There's an unboxing of the care kit that is going to be given to all students as they come to campus that contains masks, hand sanitizer, and a thermometer. You may see students, young people often do these unboxing videos if they get a new iPhone. And it's kind of a clever thing that people put these up on social media. So that is sort of, again, another technique used to address the types of channels and messages that students are watching. We're going to have a Mask of the Week campaign every week. We're going to feature a new student who's wearing a mask. So these will be ones taken out in public areas or in buildings, and we'll be profiling why they're wearing a mask. So continuing on this theme of continuously reinforcing role modeling of the essential aspects of wearing a mask, which has both protects the individual themselves as well as protects others. We've been working closely with a number of student leaders and ambassadors throughout this process, because we really need that kind of buy-in. There's a whole team that's really looked at peer-to-peer communication, asking for open calls for ideas, so using crowdsourcing, and there's a series of new campaigns that will be coming out very shortly, and that also involve the arts community and so forth. And schools and units are also, each dean, department chair, and so forth are reinforcing messages, coupled with social media and physical signage all over campus. Next. Here's an example of the types of signs that are on campus mentioning, here are the types of symptoms. If you have these symptoms, you should not, you should go back home. Do not enter the building, come to work, and so forth. And then the W's and so forth. So these are really all over campus. Next. And the messages also, besides being on campus, are also throughout town, in Chapel Hill and in the Carborough area. So again, these are constant reminders and visual cues on what we're asking people to do. Next. Here's a map that's showing the different types of messages that are out there and where they're going to be placed on campus. So again, we are really saturating the campus with these type of visual cues. Next. Messages also are featured in the town of Chapel Hill. We're partnering with Chapel Hill Transit, the town of Carborough, and the Jackson Center to really get the word out. Because I know this is also a concern, that's not just what happens on student, but also what happens in town and because the students are in both places. We can go ahead and watch this is the video. It's a very short little video promoting mask wearing. And the sound does not appear to be on.
Let me work on the sound. Are you able to hear sound?
No, not yet. It looks like it needs to start over again too. There you go.
If I have it up on my screen. Maybe we could try and let me screen share for just a second.
I wear a face covering because I am a healthcare worker and I work one-on-one with immunocompromised patients.
I wear a face covering for the Carolina community, for my fellow Tar Heels.
I wear a face covering because I want to go back to class.
Because human lives far outweigh the minor inconvenience of wearing a face covering.
Because others are more at risk.
To reduce the transmission of COVID-19.
I wear a face covering to protect my loved ones.
I wear a face covering because I want this pandemic to end.
I wear a face covering for you.
For you.
I wear a face covering for you.
Excellent. There's also another video that is to promote the attestation. Again, this is a very short little video, but I'll show again, we want to reinforce the key behaviors. Excellent. And finally, here's just pictures of students on campus that we're seeing, the types of students that we'll profile with the campaign. That's my presentation, and I'll turn it over now to Dr. Allison Lazard.
Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I hope to share a little bit more about the work I've been doing with Dr. Ribasol and others as we try to support our school and our state and communicate critical health information. To give you a little background, in March, when all this happened, I led a volunteer task force of 27 faculty, student, and staff. And we were helping our state health department develop initial messaging strategies to encourage social distancing. So we've really come together across this campus, across lines, and that's been exciting. Since June, I've been leading a smaller group supported by the state to better understand motivations for wearing face coverings, barriers to wearing face coverings, and to give us, again, more information about how we can message to encourage wearing face coverings. Before I share an overview of the findings, I just want to acknowledge the suffering in our state. We've heard from hundreds of North Carolina residents, including young adults, which is much of the focus of our discussion from UNC, and many others. In all of our focus groups and surveys, we have not identified a single group that has escaped the hurt, suffering, and fear of this pandemic. So I, like many of my faculty colleagues, hope to reduce suffering and increase well-being in my work. And that might be in the classroom, online, and beyond. So similar to Dr. Audrey Pettifor's work that Dr. Ribasol just shared, we found high compliance among young adults with mask wearing as well as others in our state. And that's an encouraging sign. Consistent with other groups, young adults want to wear face coverings, like for many of the reasons you just heard in that video. They don't want to get COVID-19 to anyone. They want to protect people who are vulnerable, people in their community. Their community might be their university, their neighborhood, or their church, among other places. And they really want to protect their families. Importantly, young adults really feel a responsibility to wear face coverings. They're the most vocal group about this from the ones that we've talked to. It's the right thing to do is what we often hear. Also, young adults view compliance as a critical step to get back to normal, although they're skeptical of normal promises, and they would rather focus on recovery or what we can do in this situation as we deal with the effects of this pandemic. Barriers, or young adults, like others, have barriers to wearing face coverings. They acknowledge that they're uncomfortable, although we often hear, but it's the least I can do, that uncomfort's worth it. Sometimes they forget to bring a face covering with them when they leave home. So thus, we really want to encourage putting reminders to have people have extra masks. Not that you just need the one, you need multiple, and to put them in all those key locations where you're going to be leaving home, the car, purse, coat, backpack. Have them ready so being without it one isn't an excuse. And thank you to everyone who's handed out so many masks to so many in our community. Many young adults also have concerns about the need to save masks for essential workers. So addressing supply as a critical need. And of course, there's social components of wearing masks. Young adults are often unsure when or if they need to wear a face covering around family and friends, especially those who they trust or know who they have been safe. So along with public mask wearing, our messages need to include social wearing suggestions and recommendations. This will allow us to expand not just what wearing a mask in public means, but the locations and ideas about what the social interactions and when mask wearing should be, when one should wear a mask. So along with those recommendations for barriers or ways to address barriers, we also recommend that we continue to have messages that focus on others. This idea of protecting our loved ones resonates. It resonates for wearing masks. It also resonates for other social behaviors. As the evidence is emerging for the efficacy of mask wearing to protect oneself, we encourage that we have a focus on not just protecting others with our behaviors, but also protecting the individual. We just had a great conversation with University Communications. the video you just watched, we'll probably be seeing one very similar about how mask wearing can also protect me going forward. And young adults are seeking out evidence-based arguments. So as we are developing the science here at UNC, they want to hear that firsthand. For example, if wearing a face covering could reduce the spread of COVID by up to 75% or another number, they want to hear this. And last, I want to highlight the importance of requirements. Simply knowing a mask is required in a business, a location, or by an employer can be as motivating as any particularly persuasive appeal, as Dr. Ribasol mentioned. So I really want to recommend mask required signage to reinforce our university, our community, and our state expectations. I'm happy to answer any questions about our work, and thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Provost, do you have more? You're muted. Bob, you're muted.
Yes. So first of all, I just wanted to thank Kurt and Allison, for their presentations, and the intent there was to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're trying to do in the unique area of communicating to young people, something that we desperately want to make sure that we get right and get right the first time. And so at this point, I'd like to open it up for questions. I know that there are many questions that your council may have for us, as well as those on the call.
Thank you. We'll take questions from council. We do have some people from the public also wishing to ask some questions, but I'll just share that we've been asking and you have complied. We wanted to make sure that your messaging included the entire community, not just on campus. We know that our community houses a lot of students, and students are part of our community. And we want a safe community for everyone. We're not trying to say it's students versus the rest. It's everyone together. And the more the messaging can show that we are one community and trying to be safe together, versus on, or having even a distinction between on campus or off campus. We want that messaging to say that masks are required, hand washing is recommended, and social distancing is a must. We know that we have some other things to work out with all that, and I'm pleased that we've made progress on the fraternity situation. I know those dialogues have been going on, and I hope they will continue. And again, embracing that we are one community. We want everyone to be safe, not everyone to be safe. So I saw Mr. Boyncey followed by Ms. Anderson.
So I've got a few questions. I'll limit myself to 3 because I want to be respectful of my colleagues here. But my first question is, what's the status of the agreement or the MOU with the Orange County Health Department? This is the agreement regarding the sharing of information and reporting of cases regarding all UNC Chapel Hill community members. And will that agreement be made publicly available?
Sure. The recent, well, we've always had an agreement, a general agreement in terms of how we would operate. We formalized that, with the COVID-19 in order to make sure that it was very clear as it relates to our responsibilities and the Orange County Health Department's responsibilities. But I just wanted to preface this that we have had a terrific working relationship with the health department, and as I said, we're working very closely with regards to seeking their advice with regards to our roadmap and many of the decisions that we're making. The agreement, it was a recent communication that we sent from our campus health and occupational health offices to the county health department, and it just simply laid out the common expertise, the common expectations of each office. And so the big issue has centered around contact tracing, but we also we're seeking recommendations from the county health department as it relates to testing, quarantining, isolating, as well as tracing and tracking. Each unit has a unique role. The campus has the responsibility, if it is a student or a faculty or staff member, to perform the campus tracing, also to make sure that that they take appropriate action once the test is deemed positive. We then communicate that information to the health department where that individual might reside. If that student is living on campus, obviously Orange County is the county health department that we would engage in. And so when it comes to tracking and the individual might be a faculty or staff member or a student who is living in the community, then the tracking is done by the health department of that county. In this case, if they were living in Orange County, it would be done by our Orange County Health Department. These issues have just been made clearer, with regards to this communication between the two units.
Got it. And just to quickly clarify, but that all is contained within an MOU?
It's not technically an MOU, it's a letter, and that letter has been affirmed by the health department.
Okay. My second question is...
I do feel, and we've been asked, I think the letter itself has been praised, by the system office as really a nice model, an example of a very constructive working relationship between a university and a health department. So we're very proud of the relationship that we have with our health department.
Okay, thank you. For the second question, I'm wondering about students who are living off campus in particular, who test positive. How will those students be monitored and cared for?
Yeah, so each student would be really dealt with on an individual case basis. Normally, assuming that they have the infrastructure to support them, that they would probably, and depending upon their own personal preference, they may stay in residence where they live. Some students may want to go home to their families, and we would certainly support them in that decision. If a student had poor infrastructure or were incapable of caring for themselves, we would certainly work with them to try to find a remedy for that, which could include quarantining and or isolating, on our campus. But to be fair, it is currently not our expectation that the majority of students who are living off campus would come back to campus for isolation and quarantine.
Got it. And then this question is related, but for community members who violate these 3 Ws or violate other community standards, what kinds of accountability measures will be in place for them for not complying with these requirements?
Yeah, so we have faculty, we have staff, and we have students, and each accountability would be slightly different. The students signed the attestation, and so they are fully aware of the consequences if they were to fail to uphold their part of the bargain with regards to fulfilling their community standards. The way we would implement that is what is at risk for the student. One is their continued presence on campus. 2 might be de-enrolling in a course, or 3, being de-enrolled from the university. And depending upon where that violation might have taken place might be sort of the determinant in terms of which avenue that we might pursue. We do not ask our faculty or our staff to sign a similar attestation, mainly because they are a different category. They are employees, and employees, there is a certain expectation to perform and to execute the mission of the university consistent with the rules and regulations of the university. So one might think of that as a condition of employment. So we will be sending out a notice to all of our faculty and staff, however, just reminding them of our community standards and our expectation that they too will be in compliance or need to be in compliance of our community standards if we are to be in a safe environment. And so those are the general characteristics of the accountabilities that we would have at our disposal while the individuals are on campus. We certainly, by extending our expectations for our students to uphold community standards wherever they are going in order to be good citizens, we certainly, although we have less control, it is certainly our expectations that students will make their very best effort, to comply with those standards wherever they are.
Thank you.
Mr. Boynton, was there a third question?
Oh, yes.
Question.
Ms. Anderson, followed by Ms. Gu.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to preface my questions with just saying thank you so much for being willing to work with the town and for being our partners. I can only imagine that as this has gone along, many of you may not have chosen to reopen at this time if it had been your choice. And I do understand that you're trying to do really good health policy research with the situation that we are presented with. And that being said, I think I have heard from people, I've never heard of before on social media, email, and phone that they're terrified. And so I think it's really important too for some of this to be put into the real life context that we're living in, that we, in the town, we see people when they're not on campus, or we see people when they're not answering surveys. We see students and staff who are part of our community in a different context. So I think we have information to share too. But I guess my first question is, what will be how will the off-ramp decision be made? So what criteria will be used? Is there kind of something that you can share with the community so we all know that if we hit a certain point, or if some sort of population infection rate or something is hit, that we know that there's going to be a choice made, and who will ultimately be responsible for that decision?
Yeah, that's a very complex question and many aspects to it. So first of all, let me just remind everyone that we are part of a 17 campus system. And so we have a shared governance body within that system led by the Board of Governors. And that Board of Governors is led by a chairman. And then we also have a president of the UNC system that oversees the 17 campuses. So just as was done in the spring, when we made a quick off-ramp in the spring semester to go all remote, that decision was made in cooperation between the chancellors of the 17 university system and leadership at the president's level and at the Board of Governors level. And so that model is still in play as it relates to reopening and also as it relates to the off-ramp. We have been expressing, to our community, our commitment, towards pursuing a safe on-campus experience consistent with the mission of the university, but are prepared, to take an off-ramp, perhaps with a lot more time to plan for it than we did in the spring. And so what would some of the criteria be or elements? We've been a bit reluctant, to say that it's going to be one thing, that is going to be a caseload or a occupancy issue here or there. But there certainly are a few things that sort of come to mind as being at the top of our list. First is availability of testing. And I know this came up in some of the questions that were raised to me. And testing is important. We have LabCorp, but a 5 to 7 day turnaround time, I think everybody on this call would agree, is not adequate, to support our campus experience in a safe way. And it is for that reason that we've worked very hard to negotiate a relationship with the UNC Healthcare that will afford us with added capacity. And so that was one area that we thought was very important. Quarantining and isolating. We have set aside 2 dorms for quarantining and isolating. It's the most, I believe, of any university in the UNC system in terms of total access to bed space. We are looking at additional quarantining space. Another dorm perhaps can come online as we further de-densify the campus. And so those would be the, sort of the top three, I think issues, that I think the chancellor and I and members of our leadership team have always felt, are going to be critical markers. Of course, we're carefully watching hospitalization rate within UNC Hospital, because we think that's a very close barometer to the health and well-being of our community here in Orange County, since the UNC healthcare system is very much a part of our community at large. And so we are very much watching those numbers and look at percent capacity and the number of intensive care units, patients, et cetera. So those are a few. There are several others, that are on our list, but those are probably the ones that would motivate us to aggressively pursue additional conversations with the system office in partnership with them and other chancellors within our area, to talk about the possibility of an off-ramp. I hope that addresses your question, Jess.
It does, as much as you can. So as a follow-up to that, I saw in some of your communications that there would be certain criteria that a student would have to meet in order to be eligible for testing. So I'm wondering what those criteria or what that criterion would be, and I guess how, given that people can be asymptomatic spreaders, or apparently people are the most contagious before they develop symptoms, if they do, is there going to be a way to do regular testing of people who are asymptomatic, just as kind of a general course of action, not just testing those who are worried that they have it?
Yeah. So we have been back and forth on the testing everybody, upon re-entry to the campus. We have decided to follow the CDC recommendations around testing, and that was really only after a lot of discussions with our own healthcare experts on campus, our infectious disease folks, as well as our public health faculty, who also concur with the CDC with respects to their recommendation of not doing asymptomatic testing. We have an exception to that, and that was with our athletics program, and we did, they do undergo asymptomatic testing via a protocol, mainly because of the additional risk that they had. And just as an FYI, when we did test our athletes, and I know that has captured some attention, within the community, when they all came back to campus, they actually tested negative, all of them. And so those positives came about after they returned to campus. Now, of course, we had a 4th of July holiday in between that, which turned out to be, after contact tracing, part of the challenge. So we feel like in many respects, that approach actually did work, and so we felt somewhat comfortable with that. Those students were quarantined, and now I think for the most part have been released, from quarantine or from isolation, now that those who were positive are symptom-free. And so one of the parts of the conversation with our infectious disease specialists was in the, what do you do with the test once you have it? The main concern about testing everybody is the false sense of security that a negative test might give, even though they may not truly be negative, because of the fact that a large percentage of patients may end up testing negative but still harbor the virus. The other part of this was on the other side of the test, that another significant percentage of people who may have been exposed to the virus and unbeknownst to the individual may continue to test positive even after they are no longer contagious. So as our physicians tell us, a across the board testing is okay, but what are you going to do with the result? And are you really getting a result for that one moment in time to make one person feel better about themselves? And so because mask wearing is our #1 obstacle for spread, and overconfidence or believing that you may not have it, therefore I'm not contagious, that might discourage mask wearing. The conclusion that we made was that we would not do across the board testing upon reentry. So that was the rationale for it. I know that other universities have implemented some form of across the board. I will tell you that they're having difficulty implementing that across the board testing, particularly given the fact that testing resources are not plentiful.
I think we've noticed that here in the community as well. So that makes sense. So I just had, well, maybe this is a big question, maybe it's a small one, I don't know. But I think when you all went to the Carrboro board, folks asked particularly about fraternities and sororities, and they had some specific questions about the fences they put up when they have parties, so people can't tell how many folks are in there. And I guess I would expand that question to say, in terms of off campus, what will the kind of, not just enforcement, because it does sound like there's, that folks can be sent home if they're not doing the right thing, or they can be disenrolled. But in terms of, is it going to be a reporting model, or is there going to be some sort of way of checking to see what fraternities and sororities and just, hotspots for parties, or, when folks send us pictures of people in baby pools stuffed in like sardines? I mean, who's going to be looking for that? Is it going to fall on the town? Is it going to fall on residents or students to report each other? Or is there some infrastructure in place so it's kind of not just Aaron Bockenheimer walking around trying to see what's going on? I mean, how does that look in terms of if and when, students are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, especially when it comes to gatherings, because that I think is going to be a huge challenge.
So we have, the one thing that we do have is the governor's orders. And I talked to our Chief Perry, and I know that Chief Perry has been in close contact with Chief Blue. And they have had a very close working relationship and have general agreement as to how to deal with some of these events that might be in violation of the state mandate of mask wearing and gatherings over a certain number of people, 25 in general outside, 10 indoors. So we have that as a mechanism. We also have alerted, our Orange County Health Department as well, and so they do have authorities, that they can impose upon individuals in private residence. And so just so that you realize, and I know that you do, but just to remind you that unfortunately for us, the frats and the sororities are on private property, independent of the university. And they are the jurisdiction, the legal jurisdiction of the town and not of the university. It's a very awkward situation, but this is how they were established. And so the houses are susceptible to some university oversight, and the ultimate card that we have to play is disassociation. And disassociation is one avenue, but what happens then at the national level when that takes place is that they leave the premises and they go into the community itself and reestablish themselves. So that's the situation that we have. We're trying to work in tandem with the town and with the county, and particularly given that this is a pandemic and we have some extraordinary powers, or the authorities have powers that can come into play here to help us.
Thank you for that. And just one final thing, what about students leaving? So if students, I remember in early March when it was spring break and students were going all over the world, what prevents students from going to hotspots on the weekend, like going home to Florida and and coming back and potentially bringing it with them?
Yeah. So we've tried to minimize travel by eliminating breaks. You know, we made the decision for right or for wrong. You know, if you go back to 3.5 months ago, I think we all were expecting or hoping that we would be in a very different place than we are right now as a country, as a state, and maybe even as a community. What we were hoping for was to be on the tail end of the viral load curve, and on the upside of the testing capacity curve. Unfortunately, we're upside down on that combination. And so, but when we made the decision to start 2 weeks early, it was under the assumption that our greatest concern was not an extended tail of the first wave, but rather trying to beat the second wave here in order to maximize our abilities, not only to have an on-campus experience, but also on behalf of the financial interests of not only the university, but of the towns. You know, because one thing that we did here in the spring was how devastating, you know, the decision on the part of the university to go remote and to send everybody home was the economic impact. And of course, we've learned a lot, you know, over the last 4 months. Some of those learnings are helping us perhaps try to figure out how we can live with COVID-19 and work together to try to make some of these opportunities for our students and for our community work for everybody. But that's the situation we find ourselves in. We have no legal right to hold our students on campus against their will. And so, you know, so if a student, unless the governor were to have a stay-at-home order, we could. And or if a state were to have a stay-at-home order that would make transport of a student into that state, that might be a possibility. We do somewhat control the out-of-state travel of students, but only as it relates to university business. And so faculty, staff, and students who are doing or conducting university business, and that translates in that they get reimbursed for their travel for doing university business, then that has to be pre-approved by myself or by the chancellor. And so we have been very strict in not allowing international travel except for under certain conditions, particularly if it's in the area of research and COVID-19 research, which some of our faculty are engaged in. But that's the only way we can constrict travel. But individual faculty, staff, and students do have rights, and they have the right to travel as long as the government does not prohibit it.
Well, Provost Blouin, I am certainly not advocating for kidnapping. That was never part of the agenda of Chapel Hill. I guess more what I'm asking is, as part of signing on to this code of conduct or other things, is it not possible to say that as part of being allowed to come to campus, we also expect that you're not traveling home until break?
Yeah, that's a good point. We have not imposed that as of yet. One thing that I should have mentioned on the front end, that our roadmap is a living, breathing, changing, evolving document. And so it is stamp dated every time we make an adjustment to it. And so I certainly will put that on our list of things to discuss, you know, within our COVID-19 roadmap committee. And certainly we'll give that some consideration.
Thank you. And thank you for addressing all my questions.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Ms. Gu, followed by Ms. Stegman.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that I really appreciate that you're coming.
Could you speak a little louder? We can't hear you.
Hi, Provost. Well, thank you so much for coming over here. I think we have been getting a lot of questions from our community, so thank you so much.
It's still hard to hear you, Hongbin. A little louder.
Is that better?
A little better, yeah.
Okay. So I think my first question, I want to follow up your because you mentioned about the student athletics program, and you said that you have done the pre-testing and the ongoing monitoring testing, but for the students being students, they still going to parties, or they're like drive wars, and these things happens, and then there is still an outbreak. So my question would be, now if we are not going to do those pre-testing or ongoing testing, then given that a lot of the cases that UNC have identified in their student athletes are asymptomatic, without testing, wouldn't those students be still moving around the community and maybe like spreading the virus without their self-awareness that they're actually getting a lot more people sick? What kind of scenario that you would imagine if significantly more students are coming to campus without testing, and they are just students being students doing regular, social activities, and without the testing, what are the scenarios are going to be? I mean, given what we have learned from the student athletic program.
Yeah, so that's a great question. If students are, if anybody is choosing not to wear masks, then we're going to have a major problem. We will all have a major problem. But we will have a major problem in our community, even if our citizenry doesn't wear masks. And we know that. We know that masks are an incredibly powerful protector. And Allison mentioned this earlier, that it not only protects the other person, but we now have sufficient evidence that supports that it protects the wearer. And so mask wearing, and the great the example for me was when our infectious disease physicians, clinicians shared with us the fact that we have not had a single patient to physician exchange of virus where a physician was subject to the virus and had the COVID-19, tested positive for COVID-19 as of yet. So we've not had a single positive case from a physician as a result of a patient to physician contact, which basically says that the masks that they are wearing are really providing incredible protection for them. And so, so we are expecting all of our students, to wear masks. And while they're on campus, limiting so if someone is positive and they are asymptomatic, and they remained asymptomatic during that time, then we're assuming that the sphere with which they could spread that would be very limited, assuming everybody around them was wearing a mask and was physical distancing. Now, the behavior that you're talking about, that is sort of consistent with young people is actually at the heart of Dr. Riversalt and Dr. Lazard's presentation to you tonight, and that is we're trying to reprogram our students, to think differently, particularly around their social responsibility, if not for themselves, but for the community that they are a part of.
But didn't you do the same kind of communication with the student athletes before they come on board to campus?
Yes, I think that's, that certainly is a good example of where the student athletes perhaps did not maintain the community standard. And so they did have a cluster, and that cluster was eventually taken care of. And so I don't think that we can deny the fact that we're going to have cases. We already have had cases, even beyond the student athletes. The question is, can we manage those cases in a very safe and effective way? The students are certainly in a different risk category than our faculty are, particularly our older faculty. And it's that groups that are at high risk that we are most concerned about, although we're concerned about everybody. If mask wearing is our primary defense, then we feel that if people will maintain our community standards on campus and beyond campus, then we can make good progress with this.
Well, I think that we all agree. I think now we all understand the importance and the effectiveness of wearing masks. But we are, first of all, we are expecting the students being students. Second, the students are coming from different communities, and some communities may not at the same level of awareness like Chapel Hill, that people all understand the importance of wearing masks. So they may continue their behavioral pattern that when they adopted when they're in their own community. So it takes time. I think that the presentation, I really appreciate that. I think they may work for other public health behavioral change like smoking or wearing seatbelts. I think it has shown in the past that it works. But the situation we're facing now, we're facing an extremely infectious pandemic. So a number of students who are sick, who are carrying virus without self-knowledge of their actual carrying them, and they are going to parties or like interacting with others in social settings, that can significantly create an outbreak. So my second question would be, if that happens, what's the UNC's capacity to deal with that? Like with regard to like the dorm, to isolating the students, or do you have a plan or trigger, like the triggers that you are going, if these criteria are being met, then UNC going to hit the brake, like scale back or reclosing again? Can you inform us what kind of plan UNC has for that?
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, quarantine space and isolation space, along with testing availability, are probably at the top of our list of factors that would contribute to an off-ramp. And so we will be monitoring the occupancy, of our quarantining and isolation facilities on a constant level. And when we reach and I don't know what that point is, but it would probably be more connected to the rate of change rather than just the absolute number. And certainly you're absolutely right that if we were to get a few big clusters of positive, then there would be a challenge, for us to maintain, particularly the quarantine space. We do feel that isolation space actually is a little bit easier to manage because you don't have to have the same level of protection to those people who are in isolation as you do with quarantining patients. So you're right to ask that, and you're right to be concerned about that. We are looking to expand our quarantining isolation capacity, but that capacity is one of the factors that are very much on our mind, and we are going to be tracking that very, very carefully.
Can you share with us what the capacity is?
So right now we have about 164 beds. And that can ramp up to, with some modification of the way we would designate those beds, could go up to about 300 beds rather easily. And then we are planning on trying to bring on a third dorm, probably after the start of the semester, namely after we have a pretty good feel for the campus melt.
Okay, so as the university administration closely monitoring those like triggering points, what is the community's rights to know? I mean, are you going to share that information with them?
So we will be launching a dashboard that will share all of this information to our community. We will also have links on that dashboard to the state and Orange County's data so that you can take a look at the comparisons. It will track students and staff and will allow you to see the numbers of positives in relationship to the number of tests. There'll be other features on the dashboard that I think you'll find interesting and helpful, you know, as you track and monitor how the university is doing.
Okay, well, that's very helpful because many people are asking that question. So my last question is, so you mentioned about that there are this one disease, but actually have very huge disparity with regard to impact and which populations that are most vulnerable. And we have seen that the seniors and then the minority groups are actually the most vulnerable populations from the data that we have been seeing. So I'm just asking that, what are the special procedures that the university is taking with regard to protecting its like senior staff or faculties, and then especially the minorities or the like housekeepers or janitors who are doing those very essential but high risk works. And they also living in our community. So they are part of our community, do not only live on campus. So they are coming back to our community. So what are the university's procedures are at this time to make sure that they're being protected?
Yeah, well, you're right to ask that question. There is a lot of data on racial disparities, and as I think most of you know, based upon the health data from UNC Healthcare, it's right around 60-20-20 in terms of the proportion whereby the Latinx population of our community is at the 60%, clearly disproportionate to population density. And while the Black and the white population is just about 20-20. So it's 60-20-20, and I think that's probably different in every part of the state, you know, but that's how it's shaking out here within our community. We are looking to see whether or not we can track our own cases based on race. We want to be careful we don't reveal the identity of people because of the limitations of numbers, but we are looking into that as part of our dashboard. What are we doing? So we are encouraging all individuals who are over 60 not to return to campus, 60 to 65, who in particular for those who have underlying disease or disease that might predispose them to being at a higher risk. We also are asking those individuals who have family members, you know, who have a disease that would be also predisposed to a very bad outcome with COVID, not to return to campus to teach remotely or to work remotely. And so we have extended our accommodation to both faculty and staff in that regard, consistent with the way we approached it in the spring. And so really not too much has changed, although we have asked our faculty and our staff, you know, in the process of seeking those accommodations to go through a process. So one does have to sort of apply for that consideration, whether you're a faculty member or a staff, whether you're seeking it for personal health or family health reasons, or for other non-health related issues like a family situation that might involve daycare, for example. We know that faculty and staff, you know, are having daycare. This is I noticed on as part of your agenda today, that was one of the big issues, you know, for the general community, and certainly our faculty and staff are having daycare issues, particularly since the K-9 program has also decided to work remotely for now, or K-12 program. So I think we're trying our very best to accommodate all of our faculty and our staff. With regards to our employees who perhaps might come from our underrepresented or high-risk populations, we are equipping them with PPE, and I just want to make it clear that the university has ordered millions of masks. We are providing masks to all of our faculty, staff, and students at no charge to them. Our staff will have unlimited access to masks, and and other PPE equipment, depending upon the jobs that they are being asked to do. We are asking them to follow all the rules and the guidances that Dr. Ribasol outlined in monitoring their own personal health, not to come to work. If they end up being quarantined or isolated if they were to have that need, we have really gone, I think, as a university system, to great lengths to making sure that not only our faculty, but also our staff are well cared for. We do know that when they go home to their community, that they also are at risk. We worry about them bringing the COVID back to the campus as well. We try to encourage responsible behavior when they go home. We have every staff member who's part of our housekeeping workforce has gone through at least 2 and some 3 educational programs to make them aware of what COVID-19 is and how their work might be affected by COVID-19 and how they need to protect themselves, the proper use of a mask, the proper use of sanitizing equipment, et cetera. So we feel that we're doing a pretty good job for those facilities that are a part of our quarantine and isolation. We have hired a special contractor who has experience with this kind of work, who are uniquely trained in sanitation of those kinds of spaces. And so we're not using our traditional UNC workforce for that particular function.
Thank you. We have all the council members want to ask questions. I'm going to move us along to next. Going to have Provost Blouin, you've been wonderfully answering these questions, and I hope that you'll continue to work with us because this is a great reference point for our entire community. They can go back and hear these answers and feel reassured of the steps the university's taken. I'm going to continue on with Ms. Stegman, followed by Mr. Wynn, then Mr. Parker.
Thank you. I have just 3 questions, and I want to also just thank you for coming to speak with us and hear the concerns we're hearing from the community and collaborate with us on that. My first question is around contact tracing. I want to first confirm my understanding. What I think I heard you say is that if students live on campus and test positive, that the contact tracing will be done by UNC Health Services. And if they live off campus, it'd be the health department. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
So if it's a student who lives on campus, or if it's a faculty or staff member working on campus, the campus-based tracing and tracking will be done by university tracers and trackers. If the individual lives in Orange County, whether it be a faculty, staff, or student, tracing will also be done with regards to county tracing. And so if one lives in Chapel Hill, for example, then it would be up to the county to do the local tracing within the county. And so you can imagine that a faculty member or a student would have contacts in the classroom or in the laboratory or something like that. And that function would be performed by university staff and personnel. Does that help?
Yes, it does. So I guess my question is, I know that for the health department, to date, I believe we've struggled to get enough contact tracers. So I'm acknowledging that bringing the student population back to town is going to greatly increase the population of town, whether UNC is talking about providing funding or somehow helping the health department to boost the number of contact tracers, because I think we don't have enough really by the standards set by the state for how many we should have for our community at the size it is now. So is there any consideration of funding to help support having enough contact tracers to do the tracing needed?
Well, as I said, in fact, I have a meeting tomorrow. I have a meeting every week with the health department. And so I'll bring that up tomorrow during our meeting to make sure that they feel that they are in reasonable shape or not. I know that we have talked about this in the past. I know that Erica has been very concerned about their capacity. At one time, I think the county had worked with our people and had done some of the tracing on our campus. They certainly do not need to do that. We have around 30 contact tracers, within the university to help support contact tracing within the university environment. I will be very interested to hear from Erica and Quintana to see whether or not we can be of any assistance, to the county, particularly after students might arrive. I know that the state has been trying to provide additional contact tracers for all of the counties, I think they have increased the allocation of tracers, but not enough to meet the demand.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. My next question was going back to the sort of fraternities and off-campus parties. I understand that, from the policing perspective, there's, lines campus, off campus, in terms of the ability to kind of police the parties to come during a party and try and, shut it down. But in terms of recognizing that those parties could be really serious, cause outbreaks, clusters, can really change things very quickly. I feel like that's one of the biggest concerns people have in our community. And so I know you don't have control on policing off-campus parties, but you have control over students being students at the university. So is there a consideration of a policy or a standard if like how many parties can a group throw before they might get, thrown off campus, or, what is that, where is that standard that the campus is holding up, and how will they enforce it in the ways that you have that authority?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have limited authority, but I will say that our student affairs office and Vice Chancellor Jonathan Sauls has really done a great job of engaging our fraternities and our sororities to elevate their awareness. The fact that they are required as a condition to submit a plan and how they're going to work with respects to issues like parties and or even positives within their own house. And so there's an expectation that they are going to be good citizens here. And so there are other tools that we can use, but they are very harsh and very, very high-end disciplinary mechanisms. But for the most part, we're trying to do this in a way that fosters their cooperation, and at least in the beginning.
And I absolutely appreciate that. And I expect that the vast majority of students will do that. But I do think people are asking us, and so we're asking you.
I would just like to say that, because I've heard the fraternities and the sororities being a big part of your concern. It's a big part of my concern. And so I just want you to know that you're not alone, in that regard. And so I just want you to know that we are committed to doing our very best, to try to make sure that all of our students, are in compliance with the spirit of our community standards and in the fulfillment of those community standards, consistent with being a good Tar Heel. And so that's what we're expecting, and we expect our Greek life to support that, and we are prepared to work with any other party, whether it be the health department or the local police, to make sure that we have a safe environment.
Thank you. So my last question is kind of linked to the police topic. I know that in starting in Chapel Hill with a mask requirement and some of the standards we've tried to set, we've really tried to avoid having people call 911 if they see someone not wearing a mask. That's a huge burden on the police department. And so I have a little bit of a concern that those calls are going to go way up when students are back if they see a group of students hanging out without masks or other concerns. So I'm wondering if there's been any discussion of an alternative that somewhere people can call other than 911 if they have a concern in the community, so we don't just completely tie up the police on responding to those calls.
Yeah, I don't have a really good answer for you for that.
I can share that we've had that discussion at the MAC and we're still having that discussion on best practices. I will tell you the call volume has gone way down in the last few months of people calling 911 for mask violations, but we're still getting them. And we're working on an alternative way to people communicate where they're seeing trouble spots.
It seems like that might be a great area for collaboration between UNC and, yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions.
All right, Mr. Wynn, Mr. Parker, and then Ms. Ryan.
All right, I'll try to be brief. First, thank you so much to all of you for all that you're doing to keep UNC safe, especially since I was a student not so long ago. My first question is, I saw in your presentation, you mentioned partnership with the Jackson Center. Could you elaborate on that a little more? Specifically, I want to know, how have you worked with the Jackson Center and potentially other community orgs to incorporate community input into the roadmap?
So which center did you mention? I'm sorry.
The Jackson Center, the Marion Cheek Jackson Center.
Yeah, I briefly alluded to that's a group that we have partnered with on some of this, the sharing of the signage downtown, and also Provost Bluen. I know Kristen has done knows a little bit about some of that too.
If you want to go ahead and could you answer that, Kurt?
I just mentioned that there's been some work on communicating with signage, but I don't have, I have not been part of the meetings, but I know the organization well. They're on Rosemary Street and have been doing just amazing stuff. I don't know.
It's the Good Neighbor Initiative, Mr. Wynn, that we're trying to coordinate better through too, for coming out with Good Neighbor, a different approach with the Good Neighbor Initiative coming up soon. And there's been a lot of coordination with Student Affairs and Aaron Bockenheimer's department with the Jackson Center, and they will continue on.
Yes. I'm sorry, Ty, I just was not all that familiar with that.
Gotcha. Thank you. My second question is specifically for, well, I guess backtracking a little bit. You mentioned the kind of levels of consequences that students might face if they, don't adhere to the community standards, such as being de-enrolled and, potentially expelled from UNC. Are those consequences being administered through the honor court system, or how is the administration kind of keeping track of that? And then especially for off-campus students, how are you tracking repeat offenders, students who are engaging in reckless behavior repeatedly?
Yeah. So no, it is not our intent to go through the honor court. We find that would be really too slow and tortuous. And so we would need rather quick action in order to be effective at this. And the kind of action would be very different depending upon the location. So for example, the easiest place for us to hold students accountable is in the classroom. It's very clear, the environment is very precise. Being in compliance or out of compliance is very clear. And it would require the faculty, to take the lead on informing the student, that they need to wear their mask. If they refuse, then that's when the consequences might begin. It's a little harder in open spaces. So out in the quad, and are very much like Orange County, we expect students to wear masks if they are inside 6 feet of one another. That's not an as easy or precise way of monitoring. It's also a wide open, requires a different kind of intervention. And so the more difficult environments, the harder it is to hold people accountable. So we do recognize, and we always worry a little bit about having rules that we can't hold people accountable to, but what we don't want is to minimize the expectations by diminishing the expectations to comply with the rules. And so, so that's been our position. We're not in a great position to enforce our standards, our community standards off of Chapel Hill, off of UNC's campus. And certainly we're going to be needing to work in partnership with our community in order to be effective with that.
Gotcha. And then my last clarifying question was, you mentioned if a student living off campus tested positive, the kind of quarantine situation was kind of up to them in terms of if they wanted to go home or quarantine in their off-campus housing. Is that correct?
So first of all, if they tested positive, they would need to be isolated. And so that's a different category. That means that they are affected by the virus. They've tested positive, and therefore they would have to be isolated. And because of the fact that they have now documentation that they have an illness, that could progress, there is the expectation that they need to be monitored, and so we want to make sure that the student is in a safe place. And so isolation is a little bit different than quarantining, in that we already know that they have the virus and that they need to be in a safe situation. And so if a student was living alone, for example, and they had no one really to care for them or monitor for them, and they lived in California, and they couldn't go home easily, then that's where we would perhaps see the need to care for them in a different way than if someone lived in Raleigh and could easily be cared for by their parents or something like that. So each student would have a slightly different situation. We just felt that from just a capacity standpoint, we would need to take full advantage of what the student felt was right for them, what was right for the campus, and what was manageable under the unique circumstances that student would bring.
Could I just add just one thing to that? This is also part of the reason for putting a thermometer in the care kit so people can monitor their temperature. As you probably know, 20 to 30% of people with COVID are asymptomatic. About 80% are fine at home, and about 20% need to be hospitalized or need more serious care. So the idea of being cared for and isolated at home is a pretty typical situation.
Okay, are those your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Parker, followed by Ms. Ryan.
Well, thank you for coming. I know it's keeping you late, and dealing with all of this is not what you folks signed up for when you took your respective jobs, but thank you. And I think as you can, tell from the tenor of the conversation tonight, not only the council, but I think as a reflection of the broader community, are extraordinarily concerned and, about what will happen when UNC, really reopens. And I also want to be clear, and I think reflect something the mayor said earlier. We don't view the students who will either be on campus or off campus as somehow other. They are part of our community. And that's why we are so concerned with their safety, because we want our entire community, not just the folks who live here, 12 months a year, but our student part, and our faculty and the staff to be safe. And, one of the things that as I was sitting here tonight that occurred to me is that when the university shut down effectively in March, which was the entirely correct thing to do, the situation was much, much better than it is today. And so we're, as you alluded to, Provost, we're actually sort of reopening in the face of some very severe headwinds. When things closed down, we had a handful of cases in Orange County. We're now, well over 1,000. We're seeing anywhere between 10 and 20 new cases a day. So it is a real challenge. And we have a lot of environments in our community that are, are very similar. Somebody I saw online had described dormitories as, land-bound cruise ships. And I think, I struggle to understand why we expect COVID, why we expect dormitories and COVID in dormitories to spread less than nursing homes. So I think, you have to, understand where our community is coming from. And so, one of the things that certainly concerns me a lot is we have effectively dormitories off campus, purpose-built student housing. We know that we have students living in very tight quarters. So, if a student who lives off campus in a house with 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever the number of people is, how are we really going to deal with that? Because you're trying to isolate and quarantine potentially, since if a student living in a house with 4 people comes down with COVID, test positive, the other 3 people are supposed to be quarantined, at least as I understand it. So how are we really going to manage that when we, have a vast proportion of our students living in very close quarters, whether they're in dormitories, whether they're in, off-campus houses, apartments? It just seems that we have conditions which are primed for rapid spread, and yet we are sort of relying on masks as our primary defense, number one. And then to add to that, it seems like we're really relying on a complaint-driven system when we talk about bad behavior. And I don't want to just focus on fraternities, because people can behave badly. And whether it's me or anyone in the community, not just students, behaves badly. I think that, but in the case of students and in the case of these large off-campus housing complexes, we need more than just to be complaint-driven. I think we need to have some active monitoring so that we don't wait for things to be bad. We try to nip things in the bud, and even though you may not have the authority to enforce at fraternity houses, you may not have the authority to compel behaviors, but you certainly have the ability to put people out in the community to make sure that when we see bad behaviors, they are promptly, that the appropriate intervention is staged. And I'm not seeing that. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So let me just clarify, what do you mean by putting someone in the community to monitor bad behavior?
I think basically, while, I don't want to place the burden on our police force, but, in a dormitory, sort of the good news is you have some sort of an infrastructure to monitor. You have resident advisors, you have people like that in the dormitories. No such infrastructure exists in the community. And so it seems to me that, I don't know what it looks like, I really don't, but being more proactive about identifying bad behaviors and stopping them, rather than waiting for somebody to pick up the phone, call 911 or some other hotline to report the behavior, and then make it a police intervention or a public health intervention.
Yeah, so I touched on this a little bit earlier. When students are out in the community and living, that the university has limited opportunities to control what they do. And so the town does have, some authority, as it relates to whether it be compliance of mask wearing or physical distancing or other behaviors that are inappropriate by any standards, as a member of the community. So I guess what I'm hoping for is that we would have conversations. I meet with the town managers once a week. It's a great opportunity for me to hear if there are issues and problems that require attention. I don't see where we would be able to staff, having university personnel scattered all around the town of Chapel Hill, sort of in their own way, policing our students. That's I don't see that as an option, to be honest. I guess what we would pledge to do is to work carefully with you on a week-to-week basis, and or if there are circumstances that arise to a level that require that you believe that requires our cooperation and attention, then we're committed to do that in partnership with you. I don't know how we would pursue that, Michael, you know, in the current context of our either resources or even our authority.
Could I propose something real quick? Just as a person who lives in the Cameron McCauley Historic District, which has a lot of student rentals. And in fact, on my street, just down the street from where I am now, there is a fraternity. On the last day of classes, LDOC, which is often an infamous party day, you see Aaron Bockenheimer, who I think someone alluded to earlier. He's out, he has a UNC ID, he walks around, he's very proactive about trying to ensure that, you know, people are as safe as possible. I think we should, we might want to go back and explore, are there ways of doing similar types of initiatives? We obviously don't have the resources, as Provost Bullen said, of going out in all neighborhoods, but there's a handful of neighborhoods in Northside, Cameron McCauley, and a couple of other neighborhoods where there are significant clusters of students and or Greeks. And it may be possible that there could be something we could do in partnership with the town to be out and check on certain, you know, maybe Thursday evenings or weekends or something. That this is something I think we could potentially explore.
Thank you. And just one other question. I think many of my questions have been addressed by my colleagues and the hour is growing late. But you've talked about the relationship with UNC Healthcare in terms of doing testing and turnover. What specific commitments do you have from them in terms of numbers of tests they expect to be able to process for you on a daily basis, and what kind of turnaround they're committed to giving you? Because we know that LabCorp is, you know, as you earlier mentioned quite correctly, 5 to 7 days on a good week. So what is the commitment that UNC has made to you in terms of testing?
Well, we've, you know, UNC Healthcare through their current testing program has been very consistent in being able to provide 24 to 36 hour testing returns. And that's the level that we need in order to support many of our requests, not all of them, but many of them. And they have indicated their support for doing approximately 200 plus tests per day, you know, for us in that under those protocols. Now they don't do asymptomatic testing. They would do either testing consistent with CDC recommendations, which would be symptomatic testing, or those who were in contact with a positive test. And so if there is the willingness to do asymptomatic testing as part of tracking. So that's likely the agreement that we will have with UNC, or something to that effect.
And just in relation to the number of tests, I mean, I know it's a situation that's very much in flux, and you know, you're trying, you know, it changes daily. Do you have what's your best guess at this point in terms of total students that you expect to be in our community, whether it's on campus or in the community at this point? I mean, your normal enrollment is about 30,000 who are all generally in the community. Do you have any estimate, you know, will that be 20,000, 10,000? Do you have any sense of how things are going to look, you know, when people start showing up in the next week or so?
Yeah, so I don't have the specifics. I have some numbers with respects to the dorms, which is where we're getting, where we have actual commitments. You know, our dorm capacity is normally right around 8,700 students. We're expecting about a 30% reduction in our dorm environment. And so that's one aspect of the de-densification. We also have a relatively large number of students. I don't have the final numbers on that, but would be happy to share that with Maurice once we get those numbers. But the split between those students who will be remote learning or versus have a residential component. And so obviously we have we're expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 1,500 students that will be enrolled in the Carolina Away program, which would be totally remote and have a very unique and distinctive feature to it, trying to replicate in a virtual environment the UNC campus experience. And so those students would all be remote. And then there's quite a few students who have sought accommodation for remote only for their entire for this entire semester. I just don't have the numbers on those. And so, so yeah, we have about 19,000, normally 19,000 undergraduates, about 9,000 or so graduate students, 9,000 to 10,000 graduate students, and professional students. And so that pretty much makes up our student population. Our total enrollment is, as of right now, pretty steady, but with a relatively large number of students who are opting to the remote only or hybrid model.
Well, thank you again for taking the time. We appreciate it. And I think we all understand, you know, the very challenging circumstances you find yourselves in.
Yeah, well, thank you, Michael. It has been a challenge. And one of the things that we did do early on in this process, you know, the Chancellor and I, probably one of the most interesting conversations that I've had in a long time is we met with a group of campus ethicists, about 5 or so faculty who give a lot of thought to ethical dilemmas as we are experiencing. And they were very helpful, I think, to us as we talked about some of the moral ethical dilemmas that we face in making these decisions. And that there are many factors, you know, to consider. One is safety, but there are other factors as well. And they urged us to, you know, make sure that we don't forget about those as well. You know, the educational experience, the research loss, the economic loss to the university, as well as to the community, and the impact that would have on some of our most vulnerable staff. And so, you know, some of our students have nowhere to go. You know, some of our students have access to the best healthcare in the country by being here in Chapel Hill. Even if we went totally remote, based upon the numbers that we had in the spring, we know that there are many students, including international students and students from other communities, particularly coming from disadvantaged communities in which Chapel Hill is the only place that they really can go safely. So we expect that we would still have to be the home of students, even if we went totally remote. And that's exactly what we did in the spring. You know, of course, it's easier to manage a smaller campus number, and with a de-densification in the 1.5 to 2,000 range. It's certainly a lot easier to practice many of the things that you're asking us to do.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ryan. We'll wrap up.
I'll try to be quick here. Thank you so much for coming tonight and spending time with us. I'd like to start by echoing the mayor's sentiments about how we need to think about this as a whole community. I think there needs to be a mindset change. I've been rereading the roadmap and looking through things. And when you talk about community, the community is very campus focused. I love the mask video that you guys produced. I thought that was very effective, but I really wish somebody had been on a town bus or had been obviously on Franklin Street. And so that we can try to just not have that distinction that these behaviors end at those stone walls, but that there's something we're going to all do together. So just as all this evolves and your communications evolve, if you can just start thinking about those kind of things, I think that would be a big help. And it will help the students too, because the expectations then can become seamless across.
I think that's a great suggestion. And I'm going to ask Kurt and maybe Allison maybe as a follow-up if we can maybe start to have some conversations, and Joel, get your team on this as well, to maybe do some video and some public relations some videos that we can share with the general public, you know, with regards to community life.
Yeah, that would be great.
That would be great. So my first question, would it be possible to extend some of those university community standards into the whole community, right? So your expectations around mask wearing, again, they're not simply in the dorm hall and then in classrooms and when you're in the pit, but that when you're on Franklin Street. I think that would be something that would be appropriate for the students to agree to. I think it would fit nicely in with your roadmap philosophy. And I think it would be a big help, again, trying to get this sense that we're all in it together.
First of all, we agree with that. And the biggest challenge, obviously, is you know, holding people accountable to the standards that they have attested to. And so let me bring that back to our committee and see what we can do, you know, with regards to having something a little bit firmer, other than the fact that, you know, we espouse that all the time. I know that the chancellor espouses it all the time when he's in front of students, and we will continue to message that. I know Kurt's communication team is messaging that. It's embedded in the messaging. And so let us see how we can do a better job of conveying, when we talk about community standards, extending that beyond the low walls.
That would be great. And I think you've spoken to about how hard it is for you to enforce when things are off campus, people in private residences. But if students have signed on to those community standards and those community standards clearly then extended to town, then my guess is that that gives you options for putting sanctions on those behaviors that you describe in that in your community standards. So you can hold, so somebody say who's a repeat offender for holding house parties, even though they're not on campus, they've agreed to maintain those same behaviors off campus. And then I think you could have university sanctions, which would I think that's our most effective tool here for that. So thank you for considering that. Councilmember Gu brought up how employees are affected by this. One, and I know you talked a lot about people working remotely and your processes for doing that, but I'm concerned too about the people who can't work remotely, so the janitorial staff. And you talked about their PPE, but I know one of the things that town discussed really early on was how we make it possible for folks who are hourly employees and essential employees, how we make it possible for them to stay home financially. So for instance, if somebody has come into contact with a coworker who has COVID, their housekeeper, and they have to go home and quarantine for 2 weeks, are they still being paid? What is the university policy on that?
Yeah, I thought I mentioned that, but it is our policy to continue to pay individuals who are on quarantine or isolation. I also would just mention that in the spring, there were many university employees who could not perform their jobs by working remotely, and the job no longer existed on campus. We continue to pay those people, despite the fact that you know they were not in a position to really perform their duties in the way that they would normally or traditionally be asked to do. So I do think that the state and the university system has been incredibly generous, you know, to all of our faculty and staff, you know, in trying to support them, regardless of what level they are within the organization.
That's great news because, you know, too, it's good for them, but it also helps community spread. Folks who can't, you know, who wouldn't be paid and feel like they have to go to work even though they're sick. And, you know, that just makes everything worse. So I'm super happy to hear that.
We're trying to make sure that people do their own personal health check, and we're recommending that they stay home. you know, if they have a fever, or we don't want them to come to work, and we don't want to create an incentive for them to have to come to work.
No, that's good news. My last question is, at one point you said testing resources are not plentiful, and we know that. So if we're bringing 20,000 plus people into town, how will that affect the testing capacity that's available to the community currently?
Well, I think it's going to stress it. But one thing that I know that University Hospital is doing is also ramping up their capacity. So they have ordered additional equipment that will enable them to double and then eventually triple their testing capacity over the next month and a half. And so so when I talked about, you know, the agreement that we have with them, that's under the current testing capacity. We're expecting that over the next month and a half that testing capacity could double or triple. And so we've been very appreciative of the help and the cooperation of UNC Healthcare. They have been just fantastic, you know, to work with. We know that they have their priorities. Their priorities are to sick patients and certainly people who might come down with symptoms who are part of the healthcare workforce. So we know that our asymptomatic student may not be at some point the highest priority for them, that members of our community may need to access UNC Healthcare and are going to need that test. So we do not want you to feel that we're competing, you know, for that test, you know, that community member is going to need in order to get quality care, you know, from UNC Healthcare.
And I think, I mean, as you said, I think realistically there is going to be some competition. So I don't know if you've talked about batch testing student groups that will help free up some testing capacity.
We have explored some aspects of batch testing. Some universities have experimented with large-scale batch testing, as many as 100 or 50 to 100 individuals. UNC Healthcare has done some batch testing in the past. As of right now, based upon the guidance and the advice that we've had from the university, we have decided not to do that at this time, but they have the capacity and the ability to do that. And so upon their recommendation, we would do that if that was their suggestion.
Yeah, and I guess I would ask you to bring that up with them again, because that, to me, I think that they were making that recommendation from a healthcare standpoint. And I think now we're talking about a community access standpoint. So I think that's adding a new dimension and a new wrinkle to that discussion. So if you can pursue that with them, I would appreciate it, because I do have concerns. Our testing is already inadequate, and having that many more people in town will stress it more and more. So we need to figure out a way that we can make that, whatever we have, we can stretch it to make it work as best it can.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
All right. Thank you, Council. Provost and team UNC. You can hear there's a lot of thoughtful concerns and questions. We are hearing a great deal from our community, the broader community, not just campus, but the entire community, about concerns moving forward. And we know this is a complicated and complex situation. We're very grateful for all the communication and partnership and listening that goes on between the two. We know it's an evolving situation. We know this pandemic is nothing like we've ever seen before, and that we're all learning as we go as well. But we do want everyone to be safe, and we want to take the knowledge that we learn and put it into practice to keep people safe. You have been very generous with your time. I will tell you that we do have a number of people signed up to speak, but I will offer you this because when we talked earlier, I knew you are on a time clock for another meeting as well. We will listen to their comments. You are welcome to stay and listen and respond, or if you can give us a place we could direct the questions in writing to come back from you guys, that might be an option for you as well. We will ask the questions to our clerk will be recording the questions and that we can get them to you, or you're welcome to stay and hear. We have about 15 people signed up to speak, which will grant that we move to a 2-minute per person, and we still have more on our agenda this evening as well. But we know this is an important community issue, and we know that everyone's been working really, really hard. So with that, I offer you whichever option you would like to have, but we are very grateful for you spending time and your thoughtfulness, and we sent a lot of questions in ahead of time, and you were very gracious to answer those as well.
Well, I'm here to serve, and I'm happy to do whatever you would prefer.
Well, let's see what the quick questions yield, if you're good with that, and we will move along. And I will ask the public if the question's already been answered, we'd ask you to defer, but we also do welcome your input, and there is other opportunity to send your questions in writing as well. So Mr. Parker, if you will call the first 2 people, and again, we're asking folks to stay within the 2-minute marker for asking or making their statements or asking their questions, whatever they'd like to share with us, please.
So we have a few people who signed up who are not showing up on our participant list, but may be participating by phone. We have a number of folks participating by phone, and we cannot easily identify who they are. So if you are participating by phone, please press *9 on your phone so we know you're there and we know that you want to speak. And the first individual we have signed up is a Jennifer S., who we do not see on our list of participants. So if you are still wanting to speak and you are joined by phone, please press *9 on your phone so we can call on you. And after that, it's James Tolentino who wishes to speak, and he did, I believe, he is showing up on our participant list. So if Amy, you will try to bring the first folks in, we would appreciate that.
I have James available.
Okay. And followed by Diane Bloom. So Diane will be next.
James, are you with us? James?
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you have 2 minutes, please.
Yes, so my general question has relatively already been answered. It had to do with violations, community guidelines, with off-campus housing and students. I'm a rising junior at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm also a Borgen Project ambassador. And I just want to reiterate that a lot of the community, I've been working with the Jackson Center for majority of the semester distributing food. And I just want to reiterate that a large majority of off-campus housing is located in the North Side and Pine Knolls community, which again has a very large community of the most at-risk population, that being elderly African Americans. And I just want to reiterate the importance of the town and the university working together to find a way to uphold the policing of students in that community, to ensure that there is no outbreak and that these individuals are not being put further at risk. And through most of the conversation that I've heard, it seems that the university is taking on a brunt of that responsibility, despite off-campus housing being outside their jurisdiction. And there doesn't seem to be a clear response or solution to this issue. And I just want to reiterate the importance of the town and the university working together to get some system in place to hold students accountable, to make sure that there are no guideline violations or mask violations or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you. Diane Bloom, followed by Elizabeth Evans. And again, Elizabeth, I may be on the phone. So if Elizabeth is here, Ms. Evans, please press *9. Diane?
Okay, thank you. I'm Diane Bloom, and I'm an adjunct of the School of Public Health, but I'm just speaking for myself as a community member. And I have a couple of questions. And the first one is that since we're bringing back so many thousands of students from all over the state, and in fact, maybe all over the country, and it would be really, I just wondered if you could not admit anyone to campus until they come back with some evidence that they were tested at home and they are not positive. And I say that just because they're now thinking that anywhere from 30 to 50% of spreaders are asymptomatic. And it would just give the community a lot of peace of mind to know that at least when they show up, they're negative. So that was one of my questions. I know that surgeons are doing that, clearly on a different scale, but a lot of surgeons are asking people the week before their surgery to go and be tested at their own testing place and to show that they are negative for COVID. The other thing is that I'm wondering, I know that it's hard to get adults to wear masks. And I know that students and other people too behave differently when they're taking surveys and behave differently when they feel that they are being watched as opposed to that they're not being watched. And I'm just wondering who will be the enforcer. I mean, not just the professors in the classes, but if there are students that are in groups and not wearing masks, will there be any enforcer? Is it just going to be, we hope they listen. We hope they, they comply. And the third part of my question is really that on the Parents UNC Facebook page, there are already parents that are complaining because their son or daughter's suite mates are already inviting people to parties the first week of school, either parties in their suite or parties in their dorms. And I'm just wondering, how will that be prevented? It seems like, this is kind of headed for disaster. I hope I'm wrong, but it just seems like there's just not enough control that the university could have over students to not have a lot of cases and to not have vulnerable people in the community catch it and die. So those are my questions about the testing before they ever come to school, and about who will be enforcing the mask and who will be handling the parties that are already scheduled.
Thank you.
Okay, is Elizabeth Evans on the line, or has she made herself known to us, Amy?
Let's see if
You want me to answer that?
if you'd like to respond, you're welcome to. You did cover some of this earlier, but if you'd like to respond.
Let me take the last question first. The suite mates amongst the group seeking to have parties. So we are not allowing students to have guests in their dorms or in their suites. We also there are two instances in which mask wearing or not wearing a mask will be permitted. One is as they are sitting in the dining room getting ready to eat. The other is in their dorm with as a single occupant or as a dual occupant. So their dorm mate, assuming it's a paired environment, that they will be allowed not to wear masks. And so we're considering their dorm mates as an extension of their core family. But suite mates are a broader extension, and so we are expecting all suite mates in their presence to wear masks. And so the absence of individuals, guests in the dorms and in the suites will be a requirement, and that will be monitored. We also have RAs, who monitor all of the activities within the dorms, and there is some level of accountability. One of the things that we have heard from parents and from students is that they very much want to have control who their suite mates are, so that they will be paired with people, roommates and or suite mates who are as committed as they are in terms of the community standards. So that would be my response to that question. As it relates to asymptomatic testing, we addressed that, Diane, in the earlier portion. After consultation with our healthcare experts, and we have chosen to adopt the CDC's plan. I know that that's not what everybody would like, but as of right now, that's the policy that we're moving forward with. And then as far as who the enforcers are, as I mentioned previously, it kind of depends on the space, that the students or faculty and staff might be in. Classroom, a lot easier to enforce. Out in the open, in the quad area where people are walking around, some greater than 6 feet, some less than 6 feet. That's the most difficult areas, to enforce. And what we do have is a number of student leaders who have asked, to play roles and providing positive reinforcement and serving as a check on each other as peers. And so we're going to see how that works out. We have a little bit less concern out in the open as spread of the virus out in the open air. Certainly it's a much safer environment to be in. So as of now, we certainly are going to have a lot of presence around campus with students. Hopefully providing some peer support for each other. And we will have, our campus police making rounds, but we're trying to minimize, just as you are, within the community, trying to minimize, the campus police and being a very authoritarian, kind of disciplinary action, or that would sort of be our last resort tactic moving forward.
Thank you.
Could I just add one really quick thing to that, which is part of the video is to prevent the problems of heavy-handed enforcement, is to really prevent these issues and build a social norm. So with cigarette smoking, this is my main area of research. If you go in, if someone lights up a cigarette in the middle of a restaurant, other people will self-enforce and say, hey, that's unacceptable. You don't necessarily need to call the police. And so what we really want to do is build this norm, preempt as much of this as possible, and have other people also intervene and step in and mention this.
Great. All right. Michael, who's next? You're muted.
Yep. So Leah Metcalf is next, and Leah is followed by Louis Rivers.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Hi, good evening.
Please.
Thank you for hosting this meeting. I'm a student at UNC. I'm a graduate student in the School of Education. I appreciate the hard work that's gone into thinking about ways to imagine reopening campus. I personally believe it's not possible to do it safely, and that by opening, we're making a decision to unfortunately cause deaths that could have been preventable. I understand there are lots of difficult situations around that. I specifically want to name that I'm aware that there's the pressure from the Board of Governors to open. I'm aware that there's been little financial support from the state as well as the federal government to open. And I would really encourage everyone on this call to try to use their time over the next few days to be imaginative, to think of ways to put a lot of pressure on other agencies to reduce the financial burden on UNC of not opening. That being said, I think that it's a really problematic decision that will kill people. On lots of people's minds, that a lot of these projections about the death rate, they seem to be rosy, overly rosy, bordering on a little bit delusional. And I specifically want to talk about two things. One is I have a question about how we're going to overcome what seems like an insurmountable barrier in terms of educating people who, mostly for political reasons, have decided that mask wearing, they've heard all the evidence, no matter what anyone tells them, that is something that is anathema to their belief system. I hear that we're going to make it so that students who believe that will have their status on campus in jeopardy, but they have family members who visit them. They walk around in the community, and I'm concerned by and large that a lot of these educational methods will fall on deaf ears if we're talking about converting people who have already decided that they don't want to be converted. Second of all, I just think that masks are not panaceas. There was a study at UC Davis in July that found that they are helpful. They stopped many they stopped many instances of transmission that otherwise would have occurred, but the risk is decreased by 65%. It's not a perfect solution. So all those things in mind, I'm just interested in seeing if there's any more efforts in thinking about ways to incentivize students to stay off campus. And I appreciate the university has tried to de-densify the dorms, and I'm wondering if there are ways that we could reimagine putting more pressure on that plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have Louis Rivers, followed by Lou Lipsitz, who I believe is also on the phone. Louis?
Welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks to UNC to come in and answering these questions, and really thanks to the council. These have been great questions from all the council members, so I think those of us in the community really appreciate that. I have a comment and then a question. My comment is that I think inadvertently we've created, UNC's created kind of a regressive plan. It seems like all the burden is being shifted to the people with the least amount of power, i.e. students, with this focus on behavior change, and then the community, which I just find problematic. Like the people with the least amount of resources are expected to do the most amount of change. So I think we're just setting up students to fail. It's really not fair to them. We're setting them up as the bad guys. And I'm bothered that we don't have more significant work between the campus and community centers. And specifically, you mentioned the Jackson Center earlier tonight, and that was shallow work at best. Do you have community members who are part of your working groups to help create standards, to actually talk about COVID-19? I really encourage the university to significantly improve their work with community members to go beyond these shallow efforts that you're making so far. And then I will close with my question, which I'd like to get a response to. In response to Just Anderson's question about off-ramps, you indicated that one, the university does not have the authority to make those decisions independently. Is that correct? Also, you indicated that there are no specific benchmarks for off-ramps. Given that, what should town residents do if case positivity rates spike? If we see increased spread and hospitalizations, et cetera? What should town do? What are our recourses? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so to answer your very specific question, no, the university does not unilaterally have the authority to take an off-ramp. That decision would have to be made in consultation with the UNC system office, which was not so dissimilar to the off-ramp that we took in the spring. And so there is expected that there would be communication between, there's constant communication between the chancellor and the president and the board of governors, as well as our own board of trustees. But the ultimate decision, is in the hands, of the system office, but we envision that this is a partnership and a cooperative decision that would be made between the various parties. In terms of the metrics, I tried to identify a number of metrics, that probably would be, in our opinion, critical indicators, that an off-ramp is likely to be needed in order to, keep the community safe. And those are going to be monitored and shared, with the system office and with leadership across the UNC system in collaboration with other universities within the region. So what we're doing is not so dissimilar to what Duke is doing, is not so dissimilar to what NC State is doing. The de-densification of the 3 campuses has been very similar, with about a 30% de-densification of the dorm environments within the various universities. And I think we've all taken not exactly the same, but similar approaches with regards to giving faculty and students, as well as staff, maximum flexibility to work and to learn remotely.
I'm sorry to follow back up, but Duke is testing. What you're doing is not similar to Duke.
But, well, Duke has proposed testing for their community. That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, it appears that the next person is Lindsay Ailing, followed by Logan Pratico.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hi, Lindsay.
So I just want to say that this whole meeting has been terrifying. I just want you all to know that you don't actually have to do this. I have even been hearing some rhetoric from city council members that you have no choice, or that the university has no choice, that you have to embark on a course of action that you know is going to get people killed. In history, which is the subject that I study at UNC, one of the guiding moral impetuses behind the study of history is that we try to educate people that they do not need to knowingly embark on a course of action that's going to kill people, and you actually can refuse orders. So just please remember that. Don't pass the blame to the Board of Governors, because even though they are in charge of the university, you can still refuse. You could risk your jobs. That's always an option. Kevin Guskowitz could say, no, we're not going to reopen UNC, and throw a wrench in the system. Graduate students at UNC, even though we have no real power, managed to throw a wrench in the system to prevent you all from spending millions of dollars to enshrine a racist statue on our campus. Which brings up another point about the financial aspects of this. Why don't you dip into the whatever trust fund that you always seem to have available for emergency racism to ensure that we can continue paying vulnerable people, and go remotely for one more semester, because we could raise more money, we can make up the cost in finances later, but you can never make up the cost in human life. And you all know that people are gonna die. Like, yeah, all of you sitting here understand that. You're gonna get people killed. So please just stop.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Okay, Logan Pratico is next, and I believe, have some additional people, some raised hands. So anyone who wishes to speak can use the raise hand function, and we will get to you in a moment. But Logan, you can start. You have 2 minutes.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Logan Pratico. I've been a resident of Chapel Hill for the past 10 years. I'm also a recent 2020 graduate of UNC Chapel Hill. And I'm frankly stunned at the university's decision to open its doors to in-person classes as the pandemic literally reaches its height. The idea that 20,000 18 to 22-year-olds, those most likely to be asymptomatic, will suddenly be walking around Chapel Hill coming from all over the country is frankly terrifying. The university should be ashamed of itself for prioritizing student tuition and money over the lives of Chapel Hill citizens. I would like to draw your attention to a New York Times article published today titled "More than 6,300 coronavirus cases have been linked to US colleges." The report details the number of outbreaks among students at colleges before the semester has even started, 37 of which are at UNC. As a UNC student, I know that students will not remain socially distanced no matter how many videos you put out about wearing masks. And as a Chapel Hill resident, I fear for my neighbors, my parents, my former teachers at East Chapel Hill High School, my professors. They will all have to suffer the consequences because of UNC's decision to reopen schools. And frankly, this decision makes me ashamed to be a Tar Heel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Greer Webb, followed by Molly McConnell. And again, if anyone who is on wants to speak, please raise your hand electronically. Thank you. Greer?
Good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, you have 2 minutes, Greer.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. My name is Greer Webb. I'm an incoming sophomore student at UNC Chapel Hill and a commissioner on the newly established Student Commission on Campus Equality and Student Equity. I'm also a member of UNC's Black Student Movement. And first and foremost, I just wanted to convey again Provost Bloom, it's good to see you as well. And thank you for spending your time tonight. But we should not be reopening the university to all students under the facets of hoping, praying, and positively reinforcing standards. I just don't think, as much as I do have faith in my fellow college students, that is the correct way to deal with a global pandemic. And so just to shout out some of those other speakers, I agree with Ms. Bloom that young people are super spreaders. And though we may not have rapid and terrible symptoms, we are the ones that pass it on to faculty and pass it on to our family members, because as has already been mentioned, there's no way to enforce students going on and off campus in personal cars. To speak on Leah's point, I believe we are welcoming the deaths with our current roadmap of students, faculty members, and essential campus workers. I also agree strongly and wholeheartedly with Louie. The fact that Provost Bloom mentioned that maybe the athletes that contracted the virus didn't follow the community standards takes away the blame from the university and allowing these students to even return and to interact with each other in close range. And finally, I agree with Lindsay. Why are we willing in this moment to walk hand in hand with the Board of Governors who has no problem tossing money out to organizations that uphold foundational and systemic racism? And so with the acknowledgement that the fastest growing group for COVID-19 infections in North Carolina right now is those aged 18 to 49, of course, many of the ages in that range being college age, I'm just not sure, or I am sure, excuse me, that this is not the correct way to go. There is no perfect solution here when we look at education systems, but there are bad and inequitable solutions. And I do think that's what we have right now. And so I'd also, with my remaining time, want to ask this question of the provost and the mayor. 2 weeks ago, our student commission on equity, as well as some faculty members, sent recommendations to university leadership. And one of those recommendations was that by July 31st, which is Friday, university leaders alongside student leaders and Chapel Hill community members participate in a mock academic day where leaders will engage in the simulation of the policies outlined by the roadmap, and we'll walk through a normal college day and see, how easy or difficult it is to social distance. And so with my remaining time, I'd love a response as to where you all are on those recommendations. Provost Bloom, knowing that you all have seen and responded to some of our others. Thank you so much, and thanks to the other speakers.
Yeah, thank you, Greer. It's good to hear from you again. And we have responded to many of the concerns, and we have met on certainly several occasions and have talked through many of the issues. We have not acted upon that last recommendation mainly due to timing, but we can talk more about that at another time. But I know that the Chancellor and I have been very appreciative of the input that you and your group have provided university leadership.
I appreciate that. Could I have a quick response?
Greer, actually, it's the mayor here. I'm sorry, this is the first I'm hearing of this. I don't know if I didn't get the email or we've been inundated lately, so I'm sorry if I completely missed it, but I will go and look for it. We have several more people to speak. I'm sorry, and we've got to get to several other items on the agenda. So you've used your time. We appreciate you coming to speak with us.
Thank you.
Okay, Molly McConnell, followed by George Barrett. Ms. McConnell, you with us? There we go. You're on. Unmute yourself, please.
There we go. I agree with what all the speakers have said, that I think this is a terrible mistake. I think the Board of Governors ought to be held accountable. It is just this appalling and disturbing. At the very least, I think the university should tell the Board of Governors that there should be no students living off campus. You could just admit only the ones, require them to live on campus if you're going to do this. No living in the dormitory, no living in the sorority houses or the fraternity houses or off-campus housing. That would be the only way this could even be remotely considered. It has been done in other schools and other areas. In years past, fraternities and sororities didn't have people living in their spaces. And I went to college and you weren't allowed to live off campus. But beyond that, I agree with everyone that said this should not go forth. And thank you. I realize you all are in a terrible position facing the Board of Governors and members of our North Carolina legislature who don't seem to support the best interest of the people who live here. Ask them, are they going to send their students to live here? Are they going to come and live in our town? Are they going to live with the students? Are they going to, how are they going to respond when a member of their household gets this illness and gets sick or dies? And I thank you, and my prayers are with you.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you. George Barrett, followed by Lamar Richards.
And we're going to have to cut it off there, folks, because we've got some other agenda items to get to this evening. We appreciate people's input. Thank you. George, unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. So for those who don't know me, my name is George Barrett, and I'm the Executive Director of the Marion Cheek Jackson Center for Saving and Making History, a nonprofit that works directly and also works closely and with the neighbors of the Northside Pine Knolls and Tin Top communities, 3 historically Black communities of Chapel Hill, but also 3 communities that have done a lot themselves to protect themselves from contracting the virus. Not only the work that the Jackson Center is doing, and from what you've seen from students who have come on who have been assisting us and supporting us and in collaboration with us, but neighbors have been doing that work as well. And I want to lift up that work, especially the work of our older African-American neighbors of staying isolated. Social isolation for elders is a negative determinant of health, and people are making a lot of sacrifices to stay safe. People are not going places. The North Side neighbors are the people who I've seen who have been models of how we are supposed to act and the behavior that we are supposed to have during this time. And I just feel like it'd be unfair and actually incredibly rude to those neighbors if students and they're not wearing masks and they're gathering. I've already heard from neighbors that they have seen large parties in the neighborhood. I've already heard from many neighbors that they are seeing students all throughout the neighborhood not wearing masks, gathering in large groups. And so why do the Northside neighbors have to continue to hold the brunt of modeling this behavior when those around them, especially our younger students who might be meaning well, but are not living up to those same standards and are putting our neighbors at risk? This is a public health issue. This is a racial equity issue. If students are not wearing masks and are gathering in large masses and spreading the disease, that is affecting Black neighbors, that is affecting Black residents. And if there's not accountability and enforcement from the university and the town, then all these protests and things that have been happening for racial equality are for naught. And I just want to make sure that we are honoring the sacrifice that neighbors have done and gone through, and that also is connected to how Black people in this country have had to continuously sacrifice for hundreds of years, but then have not received any compensation and not received any or as much cooperation in that. And I think that would be unfair. And so I just want to make sure to lift up that. And also I'm going to leave with something I heard from a neighbor that's sticking with me from talking to this neighbor about what they are seeing in the community by students. And this neighbor said to me in referencing wanting to talk to students and a message to get out to students, normal life for you can cause someone to lose their life. And it is that serious. And so we are all holding each other accountable, and that includes the town and the university as well. So that's all I have to say.
George, thank you so much for bringing the voice to the table here. I think it's important for all of us to be reminded over and over again and we need to be proactive, not reactive. So thank you for bringing that voice here. Appreciate that.
Okay, the last person is Lamar Richards.
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. And again, also good evening, Provost. Good to see you again as well.
Lamar.
I'm Lamar. I'm an undergraduate student at the university. I also serve as the chair of the Commission on Campus Equality and Student Equity. And I have been interacting with students since March in regards to holding the university accountable in reference to COVID guidelines. The larger Chapel Hill community will be at risk if we continue with the plan as it is presently presented. The majority of our students are residing off campus, and many are not currently comfortable or knowledgeable regarding how to interact with the university in a safe way. We speak about healthcare experts, but my large concern is that these same experts have no real life experience in being equity experts, and me recognizing how this virus disproportionately affects people of color. I'm largely concerned about the students who reside throughout Chapel Hill, and by extension, the greater Chapel Hill community, are going to be at risk. Our elderly community and whomever else. The insinuation was made earlier on this call that potentially our student athletes that contracted COVID several weeks ago did not follow community guidelines, which is ridiculous and fruitless, being that we are making ever-changing updates to the community guidelines, and the fact that our university has done an absolutely terrible job in effectively communicating to students what they expect from us and how we can assist them in decision-making in an equitable way. My disappointment is in the university's decision-making is embedded with me being a minority student, but furthermore, For anyone to say that the reason members of our community contracted COVID was due to lack of community guidelines to following those guidelines is ridiculous, especially when we have students and housekeeping staff attesting to the lack of PPE and guidance they have been given up until this point. I advocate for students every day, and I have the privilege of interacting with my peers and advocating for them on a mainframe. And I think that I have said this repeatedly, and the provost has heard me say this. I don't see safeguards, effective safeguards in this roadmap that lead me to believe that it is safe for our students and my peers and myself to return. And I think that the Chapel Hill community will get the brunt of this because many of our students do live off campus. And that's just how it is. And I think that we need to be more creative and more strategic in how we're approaching this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That is the last speaker. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Michael, for helping bring people in. We know this is harder during the virtual meetings. Thank you, Provost and Drs. Rubicelli and Lazard for being with us and all the UNC team. We know this is difficult. We have concerns. We are one community. We want everyone to be safe. We're hearing that some people are going to have a higher risk and higher exposure, and we need to concentrate our efforts in helping those to reduce those and mitigate those risks. So I encourage you to work with our staff and our county officials and seeing what we can do to be more helpful and proactive versus reactive. We know you don't have all the controls. We do know that voices can be heard though and can influence decisions. So thank you for advocating for safety for everyone. And we appreciate your time tonight. It's been a great deal of time, and we're going to move on to our next item. If there's more questions, if there's more questions, we will have you send them in writing, please, to our manager, and we will get those answers back to you. Thank you.
I have a question for the presenters, Madam Mayor. I'm wondering if, and I'm happy to make it a formal motion or whatever it would need to be, but I do feel like many of the council members, all of the council members, I think have expressed a lot of concern about our community, our general community taking the brunt of this. So I would like a way for us to ask for the university to work with our staff on figuring out how I don't hear enough about.
And I hear you, but we're not set up to do any kind of motions this evening. We will continue. If we need to bring us back, we will do that, but things are changing and we have more we need to get to this evening. I'm sorry. All right. Thank you all. And
thank you,
we will
Mayor.
move on to our next item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is, item number 5, authorize the town manager to finalize arrangements for construction of the Elliott Road Extension project.
Good evening. Bergen Watterson. I have not done this before, so bear with me while I attempt to share my screen. You all see that? Yes.
Yeah, yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Evening, I'm Bergen Watterson. I'm the Transportation Planning Manager. I'm here tonight to discuss the Elliott Road Extension. I have 12 slides and this should take less than 10 minutes. We are seeking 2 actions tonight. Resolution R3 authorizes the town manager to execute a contract with Conti Enterprises, Inc. For $6,047,442 to construct Elliott Road Extension. Resolution R4 declares the town's intent to reimburse itself for Elliott Road Extension project expenditures. But before getting into the finances I wanted to briefly review the purpose and background of this project. And I'm going to try, Amy Olin sent me the instructions on how to do the laser pointer. So the Ephesus Fordham Small, yes?
Yes, you got it.
The Ephesus Fordham Small Area Plan identified several phases of transportation improvements Phase 1 was the Ephesus Church Fordham intersection and other improvements at the service road there at Europa and in front of Rams Plaza. Phase 2 is Elliott Road extension. You can see it's going to be a new road connecting Fordham Boulevard over to Ephesus Church, ending in a roundabout in front of King's Arms apartment. The road is expected to carry about 7,800 vehicles daily, which would relieve some of the congestion at the Ephesus Church Fordham intersection. So staff came to a council meeting back in April of 2018 after the Park Apartments developers requested several changes to the road review, the proposed road design, which at that point was at the 25% design. At that meeting, the parties agreed on a roadway design that includes raised bike lanes, protected from the roadway by a landscape barrier, 10-foot wide sidewalks, some traffic calming mechanisms, and stormwater treatment and mitigation. In addition, that evening, the developer agreed to dedicate the necessary right-of-way for the road, valued at about $3 million, and a $1.5 million affordable housing payment. Since then, the staff and our consultant have finalized the roadway designs and have been through the bid process. So as I noted before, Elliott Road extension is phase 2 of the Ephesus Fordham transportation improvements that were developed in 2011. The total projected budget for these improvements at that time was $8.8 million. 3.8 million for phase 1 and 5 million allocated for phase 2. There were 2 planned borrowings. There was 4.7 million in February of 2016, 3.8 of which went to phase 1 and 900,000 was allocated for phase 2. There's another planned borrowing of $2.6 million. And at that time, there was 1.6 million expected in DOT reimbursement from the phase 1 improvements. Since then, 2 things have happened. The price to construct the road has increased and the project budget available for the road has decreased. So in 2017, the road was estimated to cost about $4.23 million. This estimate was based on just the 25% design, which is essentially a concept level plan, and didn't include any of the other costs associated with building a road. Things like right-of-way and easement acquisition, utilities, street lighting, construction administration and testing, and other things like that, permitting. So now in 2020, we have 100% plans. And we're looking at about $6.88 million to construct the road, and that's all in. So some of the costs that you're seeing on the left side of the screen are what's contributed to that cost increase. We're looking at about $575,000 in right-of-way and easement acquisition, $250,000 in streetlights, some permitting. We're going to need to hire a construction administration and testing firm. And then a bit over $1 million in actual increased construction costs. These are associated with the demolition of the houses on Bypass Lane, some other utility relocation. We're adding a right-hand turn lane and associated culvert on Fordham Boulevard and the roundabout at Ephesus Church. So while the road costs increased, the other thing that's happened is the project budget has decreased. Originally, the $5 million that was allocated for phase 2, we have $3 million available. That's including the 2.6 million that we're scheduled to borrow for this phase. We're also still waiting on $434,000 in NCDOT reimbursement from the phase 1 improvements. We have been trying to get that for quite some time. Also, back when phase 1 was underway and seemingly going to come in under budget, there were several other capital projects that had immediate needs. That was the DHIC Greenfield Commons and the Hamilton Road Fire Station, which funds were channeled from phase 2, from Elliott Road Extension to cover the need on those projects as well. So previously, the developer of the Park Apartments was going to manage construction of the road. We had gone through the whole memorandum of understanding, drafted a reimbursement agreement. So they were going to manage and construct it, and the town was going to reimburse them. They put the project out to bid in January of 2020, and these are the numbers that came back from that process. There's going to be a total cost of the road at about 7.53, and that's including all of those other costs that I went over on the previous slide. Right-of-way, construction, administration, et cetera. This price tag would have left us with about a $4.53 million funding gap, or 4.1 if you include the reimbursement from DOT noted at the bottom there. So in June, our plan changed course, and now the town is going to manage construction of the project and coordinate with the developers very closely along the way. We put the project out to bid on July 7th and got 3 bids back on July 24th. And the low bid plus all of those associated costs puts us at $6.88 million, which would be a $3.88 million funding gap. And then of course down 3.44 if we're counting that DOT reimbursement. So while we still have a funding gap to close, the rebid process that we just did is saving the town approximately $650,000. So I think that that was a good decision to make. So I'm going to hand this over to Amy Oland now to talk about the debt financing and the plan for that.
Thanks, Bergen. Hello, Mayor and Council. So we thought it would just be helpful to provide a little summary of where the additional funding is going to come from. As Bergen mentioned earlier, we had in our 5-year debt plan set aside to borrow $2.6 million for this part of the phase 2 project. That was when we had original cost estimates. Now looking at that difference, we had to go and look to see what we could do. So I think last we talked, we had plans to borrow for the Municipal Services Center spring/summer of 2020. So we are not ready to move forward with that project at this time. So what that affords us is the ability to push back the project, and the amount that we will save, or that's really released in terms of capacity, is $3.4 million. That's principal and interest. That's 1-year payment. So we have that set aside for this, and some other things that have happened as a result of the markets and everything that's going on. Interest rates are a lot lower than we anticipated when we put together our projections. We're always very conservative in terms of interest calculation, and we were looking at somewhere between 4 and 5%. Now, depending on when we go out to market and what vehicle we use, we're looking more in the 2 to 3% range. So that will afford us some additional savings. And so what we're showing here is that we have the capacity in terms of available debt capacity to be able to take on this debt, should council agree to allow us to move forward with the project. If council agrees, next steps, we'll work with Davenport and Company and with Bob Jessup to talk about what our financing timeline would look like. At this point, we are evaluating some other projects, and so the question becomes whether we combine it with other projects, or whether we, one other thing that's available to us is we have a small opportunity to do a little refunding to try and reap some market savings that by itself might not be worth it, but to combine with this borrowing might make it worth it, because it offers us a collateralized asset, which we would need to get a better interest rate to be able to borrow, because it's for road reconstruction. So there's no asset there to collateralize. So in terms of depending on which financing option we move forward with, we're looking at somewhere in the fall, October, maybe November timeframe. We will be coming before council to actually borrow those funds and get council approval to move forward with that. In terms of the item itself, we have the reimbursement resolution as part of the item, because what that allows us to do is it allows us to get reimbursed for any expenditures that we have to front, because we would be moving forward with the contract now before we actually had the borrowing in place. And so that just affords us the opportunity to reimburse for any expenditures that we incur in the in-between period of when we actually start spending money and when we borrow for it.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, back to the resolutions so you can have them in front of you for any discussion or questions.
Okay, thank you. Council, are there clarifying questions? We have some members of the public wishing to speak. All right, well, we'll just say that before we get the comments from the public, we're pleased that the staff went back out for bid because we knew construction prices had been dropping. We wanted to see if we could find some savings on this project, and they were able to do so. So that helps us quite a bit. So we appreciate the effort that you went to and that brought this to this meeting. All right, Mr. Parker, we have people signed up to speak.
Yes, we have 3 individuals signed up to speak. The first 2 are Rita May, followed by Julie McClintock.
Okay.
Ms. May, are you there?
I am. You turned off when went on. My name is Rita May, and I'd like to thank Mayor Hemming and members of the council. As revenues from municipalities and states across the country shrink, ours will be no exception. The town must halt this large expenditure, such as $6 million to authorize proposed Elliott Road expansion until the reality of revenues becomes clear and the budget is renewed and reviewed afresh. Looming beyond the immediate crisis are the enormous financial repercussions of the pandemic that are likely to reshape higher education, as we heard earlier, and our town for decades. We stand at a moment when what we understand by ordinary course of business will change forever. Not recognizing this shift would reveal Chapel Hill Council is stubbornly lacking foresight at a critical moment. The council can only negatively impact Chapel Hill if it doggedly pursues projects created years before, 2011, on assumptions made a long time ago before a global pandemic revealed the impact that a genuine crisis can bring to everyday life. As we receive our deliveries, we know that what we remember as shopping has changed. As we log into the Zoom call, seamlessly stepping into an office space or a classroom, what we knew as office space is now our own homes. What we remember as a transportation imperative will also dim as the University of North Carolina understands that the paradigm of education itself is inevitably and going to have to accommodate online learning and as it assumes that permanent place in higher education. Funds the council spends now may be sorely needed for essential services in a very few short months. I therefore ask specifically that the council reconsider all non-essential, I'm going to say that again, non-essential transit funding at this time. Thank you.
You?
Okay, thank you. Next is Julie McClintock, followed by Nancy Oates.
I was just, this thing didn't go on.
Can you hear me, Michael?
We can hear you.
Can.
Very good. All right. Tonight, you're asked to approve funding in a construction contract for extending Elliott Road. Here's an overarching question to think about. If you believe that a former council or elected body has made a mistake, what is your responsibility to change course? These remarks tonight that I'm making reflect a great number of frustrated people who desire to see a past mistake fixed. Yet the current council continues the present course to build out the Blue Hill District. This road extension is the latest example. We see no good reason for spending taxpayer money to build it for the following reasons. We sent a letter to you earlier. I'm just going to summarize. First, the town, not the developer, is asked to pay the cost of the road that benefits only the developer. Number two, why should the town agree to cover full construction costs of the road, even if bids are millions of dollars higher than anticipated? Three, the original goal of the Blue Hill District was the town was for the town budget to increase town revenues more than costs. Yet to date, it is losing money because it has failed to meet a fraction of projected office and retail development goals. The cost of services for residential units exceeds the cost of predicted property taxes. Contrary to claims being made, the road connection will not relieve traffic on 15501. In fact, it will increase traffic because it's coming from the increase in construction that you all have approved along 15501. The extension offers little reduction in turning movements at the Ephesus Church Road intersection. Finally, this road extension will cross a floodway. The design drawings only accommodate a commonly occurring 50-year flood, not the 500-year floods that have occurred several times since 2000. Why are we not building a bridge? Our concerns are that the flood threat from the entire Booker Creek watershed and that the culverts under the extended Elliott Road are limited to handling only a 50-year flood frequency. We believe that the design you are asked to approve tonight will back up water and cause flooding damage upstream and in the Mariacacas Shopping Center, which you already know floods regularly. So are we condemned to repeat our mistakes if we don't understand them? We would like to ask the mayor and town council to conduct a new benefit cost analysis for the district. We believe the district is failing in its initial objective to produce a net increase in town revenue. And finally, we object to the resolution that you're considering tonight that empowers the manager to borrow over $6 million to construct a road that was first in division to cost 2.6, and that brings no demonstrable value to our town. There are so many other town responsibilities that are far more important recipients of these millions of dollars, beginning with affordable housing and a new police station. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next and last person we have is Nancy Oates.
Beautiful job, honey. Beautiful job.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to Ms. Watterson and Ms. Olin for the presentation, because it answered almost all of my questions. And I think the cautionary tale for me here is looking at the rise in the construction cost, increased construction costs, because at your last council meeting, you approved $3.5 million for the infrastructure for the 2200 Homestead Road. And that was, again, that $3.5 million in costs was calculated at the concept plan stage. So we may be facing something very similar to the Elliott Road project, in that by the time the 2200 Homestead Road project comes forward before you, the infrastructure costs will be quite higher. And we can't go forward with that 2200 Homestead Road unless we've got the infrastructure put in. So just plan ahead for that, and maybe we can avoid some of the problems that we're seeing now with Elliott Road.
Thank you.
That is the last person who is signed up, and we have no raised. So thank you.
Great, thank you. I bring it back to council. I was going to ask a couple of clarifying questions that came up that we didn't cover. My understanding from the form-based code originally was that the tax increment financing would help pay for the road infrastructure over a period of time. And I know we get an update, we haven't had one recently, of the Blue Hill District, but that these costs will actually be reimbursed through the increase in property taxes, specifically for the 3 big apartment complexes going up now, which have not been paying the property tax rate at this point. Such that we are borrowing the money until we can reimburse the money from that tax increment financing. Is that correct? Amy's shaking her head. Okay.
That is correct.
Okay. Next, this money comes out of our debt fund where we're pulling it. It's not out of operating costs, and our debt fund is sitting, we have a surplus, which is unusual and wonderful. We have it because we've delayed our municipal services building, but we actually have that money sitting there, and it cannot be used for operating expenses unless we did a lot of motion passing to take it out of there. While I understand we're in a pandemic, what I guess I'm a little confused about is I thought we were contractually obligated to move forward with doing this road. Is that correct? I thought we were under that once we voted to accept it, that we were now bound to build the road. Is that correct, or is it somewhere nuanced in there that I'm not understanding? Marie, sorry, you get this one. And you weren't here for that either, so.
Yeah, I would ask Ralph to weigh in on this. I mean, we do have a memorandum of agreement on these projects, but Ralph could go into detail about our obligation here.
No, I reviewed the Form District permit for the project here, as well as the memorandum of understanding, the original one, which is has been modified in a couple of minor ways, and the council's resolution in 2018. And I think that at this point where we are is I think we're pretty much obligated to complete this road. It's part and parcel of the project we approved. It's necessary for this project to go forward under its form-based permit. Form-based permit incorporated the idea of extending Elliott Road. We signed an agreement with them, and I think it'd be very difficult at this point to not build this road either directly under the proposal we have or under the original memorandum of understanding, which would at this point look like cost us several $100,000 more. But either way, I believe we have an obligation to move forward with this project.
Thank you for that clarification. And one more clarification. I believe there was a TIA done for this particular area that actually said the road was helpful. I don't have the terminology in front of me, I'm sorry, but I believe there was a TIA done when they were looking at the road networks that actually recommended this particular pathway. And again, this was before my time, so I'm sorry, but I'm trying to read through the documents and find, but is that accurate? Was there TIA done to show?
Yeah, this was part of the Ephesus Fordham Small Area Plan and the TIA for that area. And it did show that this road was going to relieve congestion at Ephesus Church and Fordham and was going to be a very useful, important part of the overall network.
Like I said, I'm asking for clarification, not for any kind of, and then I'm sorry, I'm going to ask one more. We'd heard some stormwater comments about this road being built and being built to the level of engineering designs that we would not cause flooding in other areas. Can anyone help update? I know Chris was here with us.
Yeah, our consultant Chad, I think, is here, and he can probably answer that better than any of us.
Yes, here I am. Good evening, Council and Mayor. My name is Chad Beckham with Kinley Horn. I'm the project manager for the design of the project. The culverts specifically in question under Elliott Road and then also under Fordham Boulevard that will be extended were designed per NCDOT and Town of Chapel Hill standards to meet FEMA regulations as well. We were actually able to achieve a no-rise certification as part of this project, which that means that we are not causing any rise in any of the base flood elevations up to the 100-year is what will help. Excuse me, they say that you need to have a 100-year to achieve that no rise. We're actually meeting no change in the 500-year flood elevation as well. So we're actually not increasing that flood elevation at all.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm peppering you with questions. Is there a rough guess of how long with the new property taxes coming in from the buildings that are coming online shortly, they would take us to pay back this excess $3.8 million? Or can we get an update of that at some point if you don't have it now?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a high level, just to kind of go back to a statement that was made earlier. The projected scorecard did show loss. It was projected to show a gain in fiscal year 21. So that was the first year we were going to show positive. Now, noting that the loss does include the debt service payments. So that's part of that. So moving forward, this is projected to be net positive, and that does include the additional debt payment. Now, including the additional $3.8 million that we'll be borrowing, We were originally projected, because the district was actually doing better than we had planned. It was scheduled to be out over 20 years. We were scheduled to pay off over 12 years. Now with the additional 3.8, that does push that back. So to get you that exact number, I'll have to redo the calculations, but we can make sure that we get you an updated scorecard that would reflect these revised numbers.
I think it's important. We usually get a biannual update on the Blue Hill scorecard. Again, trying to make sure that people understand that we're not taking money away from another project in town or anything else, that the TIF is going to pay for itself. It might take 12 years or 20. I don't know how many years. You'll have to let us know. But that these monies come from property taxes, additional property taxes in the Blue Hill district to pay for the road infrastructure. And I know that's a confusing concept because it's not the way the town's normally done things before. But I want to just make sure people know it's not taking away from operating expenses and it's not taking away from other town projects. It can cause, when we see overages like this, in the short term, it can cause delays, but we already had the delay. So just want to make sure people are clear because I know it's confusing. So sorry, I'll be quiet. Other council members have comments or questions or concerns or things they want. Ms. Gu, then Ms. Anderson, then Ms. Stedman.
I just have clarifying question. So Ralph just informed us that the council is pretty much under the obligation to build, to fund this road. So given that, I mean, what's the council's options? If that is the only option, why do we even vote for this?
Well, that's why you're being asked to vote, whether you take your attorney's advice or you don't take your attorney's advice.
Well, let's say if there are 5 votes against to fund this road, what kind of position we're in? I'm just trying to understand what the legal obligations versus what the options that we actually have.
Well, that's the kind of conversation I think would be best suited for a closed session, council member.
I guess you could be sued.
I don't think we want to have those kinds of comments in public. I don't think it's to the council's advantage to have that conversation in a public setting.
Okay, sorry about that. Ms. Anderson?
Well, that was definitely one of my questions, is what happens if we don't do it, but it sounds like that's not going to be answered right now. So I guess I'm having a little bit of a hard time following how we've gotten to where we've gotten to, and I apologize for that I'm not remembering everything that's happened. But I guess what I'm wondering is, we clearly, like, there's several things that have happened. And to be honest, I've never obviously been a huge fan of this project. I don't like the displacement of people. I don't like getting rid of naturally occurring affordable housing. I don't understand how a road can cost that much. I am not an engineer. I am not any sort of, but like, to me, the thought of us paying that much money for a little piece of roadway feels shocking. But I guess my question in all of this is like, what if, okay, we have to do it. Let's like hold our noses or celebrate if we're excited, whatever our personal opinion is. So we vote for it. But like, how do we not get to this place again? Like, what can be our lessons learned so that we're not in a position next time where we are signing agreements that maybe are not reflecting accurately what the costs are going to be? I understand there was a time lapse, so sure, some things have changed, but how do we get to a place where we're not kind of committing to things that are confusing at best to figure out why we've committed to all of this, and then the cost is so different, and what was not included that could have been, or just how can we make our negotiating and our projecting better in the future? I get that's what I would like to get out of this, just so something can be positive out of what I view as a not very good outcome.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've had some conversations on staff about that. One is to try to ensure that we have things like right-of-way acquisition earlier in the process, and have discussions about that and make sure that's accommodated for in the estimates. And then also to come back on a more regular basis to the council and talk about the the changes in the roadway, not just with the right-of-way acquisition, but also, for instance, in this case, the traffic circle. That wasn't part of the initial discussion, and that adds cost to a project. And then there is kind of the natural occurring increase in construction costs as well. That's something else that that's hard to anticipate. But when you have a situation like this, where it's over a couple year period of time, maybe you try to build in what the average would be in terms of construction cost increases and try to envision that as well. So those are all things that we've had some conversations about over the course of the last few months as we've been going through this process, and then of course going through the rebidding process. So you're exactly right. There are certainly lessons learned from this, and I think staff has had some good discussions about it so far.
And I'll throw in, Ms. Anderson, that your group that led the changes and reforms to the Blue Hills form-based code helped put some better vision on projects as we move forward. This project was actually already out there before we came on council, and we worked through it. We didn't have the roundabout or the right of way. We didn't know to those questions. We didn't have the street frontage types all worked out. There was a lot that wasn't worked out beforehand. We've now done that, and this is the only place where we do the form-based code, where we have committed to the road network ourselves. Usually we have the developers contribute to the road network scenario, or we would do an agreement like Caraway, where we're very specific about the specific road and who's doing what. So we've learned a lot in doing the changes to the form-based code that you helped spearhead. So if lessons learned, and construction projects have just gone absolutely through the roof, but there were some cost savings in rebidding it since January. So that's helpful.
Yeah, I can live with cost increases. I mean, that's life. I don't expect us to, although I would say certainly if, like you said, Maurice, if there's going to be a time lapse, I think that's fine to include some of that. But it just feels like, I mean, if we're not including right of way or things like that, and I'm not opposed necessarily to us doing infrastructure projects or doing roads, but what is the benefit that we're getting in the end of the day, or how much is so anyway, I appreciate that. And I'm glad at least that we can go forward and really include all the costs of projects as we go. So we're not kind of surprised by millions of dollars extra in the future. So that's my silver lining for tonight.
Yeah. Ms. Stegman, then Ms. Ryan.
No, I appreciate Councilmember Anderson's question, and it is helpful to understand that at the beginning, some of those costs that we knew ultimately would be part of the price were not included. And also there's a lot of numbers and changing, so I didn't completely follow it, but part of the gap wasn't exactly a gap. It was that we gave some of the money to something else, right? So that was like $1 million-ish. Is that right? So, I think we made decisions as council members along the way to support some priorities that took money out of the pot, and we're putting it back in. So just to remind us that it's not all just cost increase. It's just, we wanted to fund Greenfield and fire station, important things. So, but say thank you for that explanation and that question. And I just, a comment, I know this project has been underway for a long time, so most, if not all of us, may not even have been on council at the beginning, but I, for one, see the road differently than has been expressed so far. I think it's actually a really important improvement. I think it will improve, take off some pressure from 15501, which is a very important benefit, I think, but more importantly, even to me, is the walkability, the pedestrian improvements, the bike improvements are great. It's the standard we want to see everywhere. And it's really going to help that sense of that Blue Hill as a network, as not just a chunk and a highway that's really kind of hard to cross and not pleasant to navigate around. So I think this is really important improvement. And I think I was still deer in the headlights a couple of months into my term when we talked about this the first time, but I remember a lot of excitement in the community also from folks who are really committed to that increased connectivity and bike and pedestrian safety. So I'm glad to see this, and I do think it'll take pressure off of 1551. Just having more interconnectivity of roads in that area is going to help with that traffic pressure point that we know is such a pain point for folks. So I, for one, am excited to see it move forward.
Okay. Ms. Ryan.
I have a question for Bergen. This seems to be a much different road profile than we usually develop. I don't know that I've ever seen raised bike facilities with a large planting strip and that. Can you talk a little bit about how that evolved and where that came from?
Yeah, the large planting strip and the wide sidewalk are the necessary street frontages for that type of road in the Blue Hill District. And the raised bike lanes actually came from that meeting in April 2018 when we were kind of negotiating on the spot with the developer. That was what some, I think, staff, community members and council members at the time wanted. And so they were adopted that night into the resolution and then became part of the roadway plans.
So I think that, and I don't know what the figure would be. I think we're getting a very fancy road here. So I don't know if we want to look at those Blue Hill frontages and see if they're really realistic as we move forward for these kind of plans. You know, and I'm all for having bike and good bike and ped facilities. But again, some of it is a matter of what we can realistically afford. So just if we can think about those things going forward, sometimes the pictures people do when you actually cost them out have some surprises in them. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion out there?
Maybe.
Ms. Stegman?
I'll move it if we know what it is.
Which one do you want to move? There's two options, I believe.
I don't know what the numbers are.
Yeah, I move R3.
I'll second.
Moved by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Stegman. Any other comments that haven't been shared? Okay, roll call vote, please. Councilmember Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pointsing.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman. And Mayor says aye as well. And I thank you again for rebidding it to save us some money, at least in this case for the right way. Motion is unanimous. Thank you very much. That is the end of our regular agenda. We do
No, we have R4.
Oh, sorry. What is R4?
R4 is the intent to reimburse.
Oh, sorry.
I move R4.
I move by Mr. Parker, second by Ms. Stegman. Any comments that haven't been shared? And Amy's going to give us an update later with Blue Hill numbers that we'll get in September. Or if there's a memo before then, that's fine too. All right, roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson.
Aye.
Councilmember Boyncy.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
And Mayor says aye as well. All right, good. All right, now we're done. Okay. Thank you. I know this was a very long special meeting that we don't normally have, and we will go back to our regular special meetings the first week of September, but we are now moving to a closed session. I need a motion. Well, I will call this meeting adjourned. I needed someone to read us into closed session, please.
I move that the council go into closed session as authorized by General Statute 143-318 7A4 to consider an economic development matter.
Moved by Mr. Parker, second by
Second.
Ms. Stegman. Roll call vote, please. Mayor Pro Tem Parker.
Aye.
Councilmember Anderson. Aye. Councilmember Boyncy.
Aye.
Councilmember Gu.
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryan.
Aye.
Councilmember Stegman.
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well. It's unanimous. Please log off. I have to be the last one off, so I will see you at the other meeting. You have a different link for the next meeting, please. Thank you. Scott, I hope you're all revved up to get the new video equipment.
I am, yes.
I hope the order, you're pressing send on that order button because that's dreadful on channel 18.
All right, folks are joining me in the other meeting.
Okay, Amy, can I go now or who's left? Okay, I will log off.
Good evening, everybody.